What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to episode 41 of the Silver and Gold. I'm Josh,
And I'm Mike.
and today we've got our NFL draft preview for 2024. I hope you guys are ready to get into a lot of prospects, a lot of busts to get through, a lot of guys who may be generational talents for years to come. But first, before we get into that, we're going to be talking about free agency updates for the 49ers. Then we're going to get into Raiders free agency updates. Then we're going to be going into NFL draft positional preview. Then next, who should the 49ers take? Who should the Raiders take? Mike's sleepers, and then I think we're out of here. So if you are not watching live, the video should be time stamped. Probably by tomorrow. So if you're watching this later tonight or early in the day, tomorrow is Tuesday, and there's not timestamps yet, bear with us. We're going to get the timestamps out so you can jump to different parts of the video that you want to watch first. So 49er free agency updates. I'm just going to pull up the spreadsheet that, I've been kind of showing you guys. Not to brag like an office nerd, but, I've been working on this spreadsheet. But so the 49ers only have one real update that I have to share with you guys, and that's that the 49ers have signed Trent Taylor to a one-year deal. Trent Taylor may sound like a familiar name to a lot of you guys. That's because he was drafted by the 49ers in 2017 to be a slot receiver for the Niners and played out his rookie contract. And then I want to say he left in free agency, went to the Bengals, and might have went to another team also in that time. But he's going to be back. He's going to be fighting for a spot on this roster. And honestly, I think Shanahan likes him. Obviously, likes him enough to bring him back. But I could very well see him making the team, even though the wide receiver room is super crowded, as we can see here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 currently on the roster, and then 7, 8, on the brink to try to fight to stay on the roster, if that makes sense. So I have Trent Taylor listed at the bottom because, he just got here. So we'll see how that plays out during training camp. And I don't know. It's going to be very interesting to see on draft night on Thursday what the 49ers are going to do. I don't think they're taking a receiver unless they move Brandon Ayuk. And if they do, that's going to be interesting. And we are going to, Mike, we should have live reactions on Thursday, right?
I certainly hope so, yeah. And also,
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't even consider this, but if the Niners are to trade Brandon Ayuk, Thursday's the day to do it. As far as if you want picks this year, specifically a first-round pick, think A.J. Brown 2 years ago.
Yeah.
From the
Perfect
Titans to the
example.
Eagles. Yeah, so I think getting a live reaction to that would be pretty sweet, at least for me, I guess. But that can happen at any point. It could be the Colts at 15. It could be the Jaguars. It could be the Steelers. Anybody between 15 to 25, it could be somebody in there. So
yeah, I'm like looking for stuff to throw right now, but I don't want to make like a huge mess. Like, the 49ers just traded Brandon Ayuk for a 5th round pick. Damn it. Yeah.
That would not be good.
Yeah, I will not be having a good day. But in terms of 49er free agency updates, there's not really much else to share. We're going to bump it over to the Raiders. Let me just pull up their spreadsheet. Mike, is there really much to talk about in Raiderland?
It's practically exactly the same as Ninerland. Only one signing in the past, 2 weeks, week and a half since our last pod. Left guard, Cody Whitehair. That was a guy that I sort of was eyeballing. He got cut by the Bears before free agency. He's a former Pro Bowler. He's played guard, center. He's basically, interior offensive lineman with versatility. I like the signing. I think some people might be penciling him in at right guard to start right now, but I I think at this stage in his career, he's the perfect, again, versatile backup to have on the interior, along with Jordan Meredith. I love the way the interior is looking. I just want to see us draft a right guard, and I'll be ecstatic about the interior for the next 2 years, 3 years. Um, and then of course there's obviously right tackle, but yeah, Cody Whitehair, solid signing. Um, I think it's like up to $4 million, like 3 base. Um, he's coming back to team back up with our offensive coordinator, who we just got from the Bears. So it was kind of the writing was on the wall to me. So
I want you to
oh,
tell me, Mike, does Cody actually have white hair?
not yet, not yet. I think he's like maybe 30, 31. Like
Hmm.
he's around the age where you would expect a guy to start basically being the veteran backup, and a good emergency guard to have.
Hmm.
So
But that quarterback that you were intrigued by is starting to develop white hair. And sort of off topic, did you see that there's going to be a roast of Tom Brady?
I did. Yeah, it's gonna be on Netflix, which is
Yeah.
cool.
But anything else that you want to share about Raider free agency updates before we move on to the NFL draft positional preview?
There's really nothing else to report. I would love to see a Xavier Howard signing at some point at corner. Just because if you scroll down just a little bit,
Yeah.
I Brandon Faison, he's a fine third, fourth corner, but and then you have Jacorian Bennett, who's still got 3 years left. He's coming off his rookie season, who hopefully can become something of worth, a value worth putting on the field. Speedy corner, but he didn't really have many great moments last season. So right now, all I see is Jack Jones and a bunch of guys that shouldn't really be starting. So I won't be too ecstatic about corner if all we do is draft a guy in, say, the second round. They could draft somebody in the first round, but then what are we doing at corner or quarterback, excuse me, and what are we doing at right tackle? You know, there are fine right tackles in the second, third, fourth rounds, but I feel like these first round right tackles are plug and play. These first round quarterbacks are, if not plug and play, developmental, and they could start by mid-season. You know, and these corners, sure, a guy like Terry and Arnold or Quinion Mitchell could come in and start possibly day one, but I just think Xavier Howard would be a big boost to this defensive backfield.
Mm. Well, I think we're ready to get into the NFL draft positional preview, don't you think?
I believe so.
All right, Mike, let's talk about it.
Let's
What
do it.
positions are strongest in this draft, would you say?
Oh, strongest positions in this draft. I will say the that Raiders spreadsheet is where all of my notes are. If you want to pull that back up,
Okay.
but the strongest positions in this draft are offensive tackle. I suppose you could say quarterback.
Good Lord, you have put in work.
I did. Most of this is consensus. I'll just say right now, running back and wide receiver are not consensus. Those are my rankings. Everything else is relatively consensus.
Mm-hmm.
There might be some guys missing. It might just be because I don't feel that they fit for either team, or I just wanted to get a couple of other guys later down in the rankings on the board instead of them. But nobody comes to mind right now. But okay, so offensive tackle, definitely the best, like as far as being top heavy, but also deep. Offensive
Mm-hmm.
tackle is a great position to be drafting this season. I think interior defensive line is really good this year. Um, you got a couple good centers, but it's probably relatively top heavy. Interior offensive line is really good this year. I mean, offensive line as a whole, just really good this season to be drafting, you know. Um, and wide receiver.
Finally, dude, it feels like offensive line has kind of been like a barren wasteland. Like there was Tristan Wirfs a couple of years ago, but like other than that, it really feels like, besides Wirfs, Penei Sewell, Rashawn Slater, it's been like overall bad offensive line play coming out of college.
Yeah. I mean, other than occasional, developmental guys that start playing relatively well after year 2 or 3, it's like very select few guys that can start day one and do good. And I think the reason why is similar to Colton Miller and Dylan Parham. These guys, they come in from college in their first NFL season as a rookie, and it's like their bodies are built for college, and they aren't used to pass blocking and run blocking against NFL defensive linemen, or for guards, NFL defensive tackles. Like, those are grown ass men. You give them a full offseason after the rookie year, they start really bulking up and they get ready. Year 2 is usually when they start to flourish a little bit more, a la Colton Miller and Dylan Parham.
Mm-hmm.
So
tell me, do you want to go position by position and we just sort of talk about like the top prospects in the position, maybe where you can see where like the talent starts to drop off a little bit? I don't know if you are that, in depth with it, but it seems like, from here, you're fully plugged in.
Certain positions, yes. I would say more on the defensive side, not so much. But on the offensive side, I feel like I have a pretty good idea of what's going on. And that's probably because in my brain, that's what the Raiders need to be looking at the most in this draft. But, corner for the Raiders, they need to be looking at, which luckily corner is another deep position. So,
Okay. So let's go over quarterback first, since, you are a Raider fan and you have absolutely been just like, you've been kind of like mouth-watering at the idea of having a new franchise quarterback. I want you to tell me, who's your guy, Mike?
Well, my guy has always been the same guy. It's Jayden Daniels. There's still these murmurs and rumors and like this slight bit of smoke that, Jayden Daniels doesn't like Washington. He feels like he got done dirty because they brought in 4 different quarterbacks and 20 different prospects on the same day as his visit. All this stuff. And now there's people kind of wondering, like, could he pull an Eli Manning and force his way to the Raiders because that's the team he wants to go to? And I think in reverse respect, I think the Raiders clearly want him, I would say the thing you have to be careful of is tampering, but I would assume in this process, it's kind of hard to do other than, Antonio Pierce texting him when he shouldn't, right? But if he were to make his own decision and say, you know what, I'm gonna force my way to the Raiders. I'm gonna tell the Commanders, I'm gonna tell the Patriots, I'm gonna tell the Vikings, I'm not playing for you. If you draft me, you better trade me to the Raiders, and you better figure something out with the Raiders because I'm not playing for you. Granted, I don't think that happens again. I really don't think another Eli Manning situation happens. I think he ends out on the Panthers, the Washington Commanders, or I guess the Patriots. I really think right now here's the thing for me. I'll get back to the quarterbacks in a second, but like picks 2 and 3, Commanders and Patriots, like I feel like in recent years we've kind of known those picks. Like we know number 1, we know it's Caleb Williams, but then picks 2 and 3, it's like usually at least pick 2 is like just assumed, like it's for sure this guy. Right now, you could not tell me for a fact whether it's Jayden Daniels or Drake May, and I love it. I love it when it's still all question marks and it's all cloudy. I hate when I know shit the day of, I want to be shocked. And obviously I want to see Jayden Daniels fall to pick 5, and then the Raiders feel, well, maybe we can afford that trade up. But granted, as we've talked about this entire offseason, trading up costs so much. And I don't really see it for the Jaden Daniels hope. There's still that possibility that they do it because I still believe all the whispers and rumors was Mark Davis was kind of really pressing on these GM candidates. Hey, I want a quarterback. You know, can you get me my quarterback? And if Jaden Daniels is that guy, is Mark Davis granting permission for them to do whatever it takes to get him? I don't know.
I've got a question for you. So you have Caleb Williams listed above Jaden Daniels. Is that just
Right.
because you think that he's going to be off the board first? Or, do you have him listed there because you think he's a better prospect? Because it sounds like you're talking about Daniels as a better prospect and that he's your guy. But I'm just wondering if
Well,
you just have, you're just assuming Williams is not going past the first pick. So, you might as well just keep him, right up at number 1.
yeah, what's up, Swan Song?
Swan Song
I
starting the wave in the chat.
Yeah. Just because a guy is considered my guy, I mean, for example, here, let's see. As for my guys right there, my guy is Jaden Daniels.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean that I view him as the number 1 prospect. I view him as, get this, the number 1 fit for the Raiders.
Mm.
Okay. But I do think Caleb Williams is the best prospect in this draft. Well, sorry. Marvin Harrison is the best prospect in this draft. But I think the best quarterback in this draft is absolutely Caleb Williams. The arm talent, the pocket mobility, it's insane. Rolling out, throwing outside of the pocket, everything. Like Caleb Williams does everything the way you kind of want him to do it. You can make an argument about his character or whatever, but he hasn't done anything to get in trouble. All he's done is play well. The only thing that you could knock him for is not taking USC anywhere serious in the college football playoffs, but that might be because their defense is really bad and, stuff along those lines and not necessarily him. But yeah, I think any given day you watch Caleb Williams, you see the way that the ball zips off his hands. It's just like, or hand, right hand. It's just like, yeah, he's easily a pro quarterback. This is the easiest number 1 overall pick in a while. But as far as other quarterbacks of interest for me, as you can see, I have Drake May after Jaden Daniels. I have JJ McCarthy after him, and then I have Michael Penix.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean that I want to trade up for Drake May or JJ McCarthy. That just means I think, based off of everything I've seen, I think Drake May, we've talked about it. We texted about it today in the group chat. I think Drake May could be Justin Herbert. I think he could be Mitch Trubisky. Is he worth the risk? To some team, he's going to be. At 13, absolutely. But trading up to pick 3 or 4 overall, no, I'm good. And then JJ McCarthy, I think McCarthy's the most interesting quarterback, oddly enough, in this draft. I think he's just a unique, not story, but the way that he was his usage was unique because I think he threw the most in the second quarter. He threw the least in the fourth quarter.
Mm-hmm.
And that sounds like a bad thing, but it's because Michigan was so goddamn good that they just didn't need to use him. Legit. It was the Blake Corum show.
I'm wondering,
and
Mike,
it was,
would JJ McCarthy be a first-round pick if he didn't have Jim Harbaugh hyping him up?
I think he would be because his physical tools, and he's a very, he makes the throws that he needs to make,
Mm-hmm.
I forget the stat that I saw. I think he might be the best quarterback when it comes to designed or choice routes or something like that. Like short yardage. Although Bo Nix is another one that's really good at that. But McCarthy's also mobile. He's very elusive in the pocket, and it just seems like I would go as far to say he's clutch. It's just hard to say that when, again, he's not utilized very much in the fourth quarter. And to be honest with you, he has rarely been put in the position to have to put the team on his back because the team's always winning. Like on average, they're winning by like 13 by the third quarter.
So he's like the regular season, Brock Purdy that we saw this past year, because people always had questions about Brock Purdy on whether he could put the team, on his back or not, going into the playoffs. Yep. What do you think of that comparison for JJ McCarthy and Purdy?
I love the JJ McCarthy comparison. I also think there's a bit of an Alex Smith comparison to be had.
So like an ultimate game manager.
Yeah, just a little. I mean, remember Alex Smith when he first came out? He was shifty.
Horrible.
Well, he was bad until Harbaugh got in there, but he could run. He was a little mobile. He had some speed to him. I can see that for sure. Let's see.
I'm not trying to discredit Alex Smith. He definitely he turned his career around, like you said, when Harbaugh came in. I loved Alex Smith, but those first several years were just like it was tough to be a fan. I started paying attention towards the end of Alex Smith's struggle, in his career, and it was cool to see, just hear about the fact that it was awful. Yeah, he was a bust, then was able to turn it around, go to the NFC Championship game. What were you going to say, Mike?
Let me throw some pro comparisons for these quarterbacks, at least half of them, and then we can kind of mostly move on to running back. Caleb Williams, poor man's Pat Mahomes. As a prospect, compared to what Pat Mahomes looked like in college, you would almost argue that Caleb Williams is the better prospect, but he's not going to be the better pro. There's just no way. I think he lines up more with Kyler Murray, but he's just not as fast as far as mobility goes. Drake May, like I said, Mitch Trubisky, Justin Herbert. I think a better middle line might be Jordan Love to Carson Wentz. Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts, Robert Griffin III. I know you have opinions on his rushing decision making and jumping into piles of defensive linemen.
You're talking about Jaden Daniels?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't think that Jaden Daniels is going to last long in the NFL if he just continues to put himself at risk, jumping into piles, jumping into hits, and not protecting himself. Because what we saw last year with Anthony Richardson was that he could not stay in an NFL football game for very long because he couldn't slide and he couldn't protect himself. He had several injuries throughout the year until he was just knocked out for the season with a shoulder injury. So Jaden Daniels, it's crazy. I feel like we've shown highlights on this podcast of him jumping into piles and into players who are hitting. So, I am very skeptical about Jaden Daniels' future if he does not, start to protect himself.
Yeah, I think he would probably learn via, NFL quarterback coaching to protect himself better. And I think, honestly, most NFL teams really try to get their quarterbacks to be a pocket passer first over being a mobile quarterback. And I think really Robert Griffin III is the perfect, teach tape on why you should do that, because he just tore his knee up, unfortunately. I've given my opinions on Jaden Daniels before. I think his mobility and his deep accuracy are big pluses with him, but his pocket awareness is not the best. And again, that rush to pass decision making can be a little hectic sometimes. Those are his main negatives. For JJ McCarthy, his decision making is really good. Timing routes, like I said, are the ones that he is proficient on. And again, mobility. But I would say, like I kind of mentioned, he has no experience with adversity. Adversity. Thank you. Yeah. And throwing outside the numbers is not his strong suit, for sure. And another pro comparison I'll give you is Russell Wilson, but like a poor man's Russell Wilson. Like as far as Wilson in his prime, he's not Russell Wilson in his prime. Which moves me on to Michael Penix Jr. As far as positives to his game, deep accuracy, anticipation, pocket awareness. He never takes sacks. And granted, he had a great O-line. And I would say one of the few fears that I have with him is his supporting cast may have been the best offensively between the offensive line and his receivers. He's got 3 receivers that will be getting drafted in probably the top 5 rounds this year. Probably Mike, top 4. Yeah.
If Michael Penix Jr. goes to the Raiders, how do you feel comfortable in Thayer Mumford to be, blocking his blind side? Because it won't be Colton Miller. It won't be Colton Miller, like any other right-handed quarterback. You're going to have to kind of change the dynamic of the pass blocking.
Yep. Yeah, because he's a left-handed quarterback, your right tackle would be his blindside protector. So, I mean, we've talked about this before, but right now I still think that my top choice as far as what I would do in the first round is I would take right tackle at 13, and then my sights would be set on Michael Penix. Wait until you find the right moment to strike, trade up in the first round, and snag him. Get that 5th-year option. Then you have your hopefully quarterback of the future tagged along with his blindside protector for the next hopefully 10+ years in one draft. And then you probably give up your 2nd, maybe your 3rd round pick. Your next picks after that, get your corner, get your offensive guard, whatever else you got to get. But yeah, right now, no, I would not be comfortable with Thayer Mumford protecting his blind side. Again, that's why, to me, right tackle is the priority. Even if it's not Michael Penix, even if they decide to go with a quarterback in the 3rd or 4th round, even if they don't go with a quarterback, get the offensive tackle, because if you're not going to take the quarterback, you better have a good offensive line.
Swan Song agrees with you. He a couple minutes ago said Raiders should pick O-line. And then, he kind of built like a little plan in the comments for the Raiders, and I want to get your thoughts on it. So he's saying that they should just get Rattler in the 3rd round or whatever. Rattler seems like a Raiders quarterback. Mike, what do you think of those comments?
Rattler's an interesting guy because he's projected to go around the 3rd round. 2 or 3 years ago, he was projected to be a future 1st overall pick. And then he got supplanted at Oklahoma by Caleb Williams. And then Rattler transferred to South Carolina, and then Lincoln Riley left Oklahoma for USC. Caleb Williams followed suit and transferred. But at the time that Caleb Williams supplanted him, Spencer Rattler was a future projected 1st overall pick. So he has the talent. It's just that his play kind of fell off. And I don't know if that's because he went to a middling South Carolina with not as good of, pass blocking, offensive scheme, wide receivers. I'm not sure. I couldn't really tell you. I would say I haven't watched enough Spencer Rattler, so I can't really say if I would pick him. But I think for a 3rd round flyer, not having to trade up and give up a bunch of future picks, a guy that was once projected to be a 1st overall pick sounds like a pretty damn good project to me. And I do agree, as far as his look, and this might be stupid, but like his last name being Rattler, like that reminds me of the Snake with Ken Stabler.
Yeah.
I do think he would be perfect for the Raiders. And I would say the main reason why is because he's this guy who got passed over, overlooked. You know, that his former team chose the new hotness in Caleb Williams over him, and he probably has a massive chip on his shoulder. And from what I've heard, he used to be this cocky kid who kind of thought the world of himself, and then when that happened, he kind of he needed to mature, you know. And it sounds to me like he did. Obviously, he's not nearly the top prospect this year, but if he's a guy who has matured and can come into a team with the right mindset and willing to develop and, you know, hopefully become something, he's got all the potential in the world to be the next starting quarterback for the Raiders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, you know, I kind of like this idea of, you know, that Swan Song is proposing that these quarterbacks, you know, since we're talking about them right now, it kind of is like a little bit of a reality show of quarterbacks, because like
100%.
you've got Caleb Williams being like the most, you know, eccentric quarterback with like, you know, all the, I feel like he gets all the attention out of everybody. And like everyone else is just like, all right, who's going to go number 2, number 3? And then Caleb Williams is like, you know, painting his fingernails, which is fine. You know, has, I guess just out of the ordinary outfits and, you know, outfit choices, you know, the stuff that people are just focusing on that's besides football, right?
Right.
And then you got Jaden Daniels and the whole elbow story that, you know, we talked about like last week, you know, that was like coming out for like the past several years, or not past several years, past several weeks. And then Rattler obviously being super cocky, and then I guess being humbled, and, you know, it literally is like a reality show for these quarterbacks. So
yeah. Each guy has their own sort of story and personality for sure. But just to finish up at quarterback, Michael Pratt, Joe Milton III from Tennessee, and Jordan Travis from Florida State are all late round mobile quarterbacks. Michael Pratt could go as early as the 3rd round. He'll probably go in the 4th, at least from what I'm seeing. I don't know shit. But the guy that I'm actually the most interested in as a sleeper is Devin Leary from Kentucky. I think his arm talent and his accuracy is probably worth investing in say the 4th to 5th round. If it comes down to it, if it's like, oh man, we got too cocky or whatever you want to call it with, you know, we take Talisi Fuaga with the 13th overall pick, and then we try to do that trade up scenario for Michael Penix later in the 1st round, and it explodes in our face. The Seahawks take him at 16, the Rams take him, whoever takes him, right? We don't get him. Let's say we don't want Bo Nix, we don't want Spencer Rattler. They take corner round 2, guard round 3, and then round 4 comes around. It's like, well, Devin Leary's sitting there. I'd be fine with it. My only issue with these later round quarterbacks past probably Spencer Rattler is I don't see them hitting the field this season, you know? And I feel like that's kind of the whole point with this big quarterback need for the Raiders is if you're going to draft a guy that can hit the field this season and make a big difference. And I think, honestly, Michael Penix or Spencer Rattler are the last ones that can do that this year. I totally see Michael Pratt and Devin Leary as potential shock the world. Oh man, like the next Brock Purdy sort of thing. Not quite to that extent, you know, but to the point of like they could come in, start a game, and be like, "Whoa, he was actually pretty damn good." And then you never know at that point because it's Aiden O'Connell and why am I forgetting his name right now?
Gardner
Little
Minshew.
ass boy. Yep, Gardner Minshew. So
I love how Devin Leary embraced it.
Oh, I love that. It's honestly hilarious, and I love his personality. I think Gardner Minshew is perfect for the Raiders. I think in another life, in another profession, he's a total stoner.
Well, maybe in this life, but you know, we don't know.
Give it 10 years, man, for sure. But yeah, that's kind of my main thoughts on quarterback. I want to say,
What about Joe Milton? He's got a huge arm, but obviously has like some turnover problems.
yeah,
And went from Michigan to Tennessee. I'm just wondering what your opinion would be on if he was sort of like the project quarterback for the Raiders and having Gardner Minshew start off the season as you transition into Joe Milton,
yeah,
or even Jordan Travis.
or Jordan Travis. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think
Because
those are the
the
two
thing with
guys to
Travis
me.
was that like he got injured right towards the end of the season, and that's why his stock is so low.
I want to say he got injured. I honestly don't know much on him. I want to say that teams are looking at him or asking to see him at like tight end right now. I could be wrong though.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those situations with him, but they both have good arms from what I understand. They would definitely be projects. That's for sure. And I don't mind a project if they're, a mobile quarterback. A
Mm-hmm.
guy that has all the physical tools in the world like a Joe Milton. It's just we got to coach him up, If you want to try that, sure. I do believe teams should probably draft quarterbacks practically every year. So if they want to go draft a later round guy, be my guest if they strike out at the early quarterbacks. Don't
Mm-hmm.
don't waste picks trading up, or even if Michael Penix isn't the guy to them, don't pick him at 13.
Mm-hmm.
Build up the roster. Build the roster, get it ready for a rookie quarterback. When the time comes, you'll get your guy. Because right now, I don't think this is a team that should be trading 3 future first picks to go get their quarterback. I think if this were the Niners, I know this is kind of a slap in the face to you, but like if this were the Niners, I would say yes. Because your team is ready to compete for a Super Bowl. It's just like in theory, trading up for Trey Lance, it's like, man, if he's the guy, we'll be winning multiple Super Bowls, not losing multiple Super Bowls. What sucks is he wasn't the guy, at least to Kyle Williams or Kyle Shanahan.
How dare you bring up Kyle Williams' name
I just
in
double
this?
slapped Niner fans. I'm so
Yeah,
sorry. That was
you
not
just
intended.
yeah, but you know what the Niners did, like with the whole trading up for Trey Lance. Since we're on the topic of trading up in the draft, the Niners went, all right, one of these quarterbacks is gonna work out. They didn't even have a plan. Trey wasn't even their guy when they first traded up. They're like, all right, we're gonna make the move, and then we're gonna scout the quarterbacks. You're doing it
Yeah.
backwards. Fuck.
That is the definition of not the way to do it for sure.
Yeah. I'm so sorry if I exposed my nostrils to everybody at home with my hat pulling up my nose, but
Good.
you roll with the punches. All right. Moving on, do we want to talk about the running backs and give like a quick little rundown, because I'm sure there's less to talk about for the other positions than there is to talk about the quarterbacks.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, let's do running backs for sure.
Okay.
So I would say running back this year is so interesting. There's no top end like first round guy, but like from the first running back to about Audric Estime, it's just like, where do you want to put them? They're all in the same range to me, and I
Now,
really like all of them.
So you say that they're in the same range. Would you call them like first rounders, second round talents, third, lower than that? Third
I would say
and lower.
these are third round talents here. And that's not in a bad way. I mean, I think honestly, at their peak, I think Trey Benson and Blake Corum and probably Jonathan Brooks are second round talents.
Mm-hmm.
Jonathan Brooks is coming off a torn ACL. Blake Corum, I think, tore his ACL in 2022, and he had sort of a down, not as good of a 2023 season relative to 22. At his peak, Blake Corum is probably the best running back in this draft. To me, and Trey Benson is a guy who had some past injuries as well. Granted, I think Trey Benson's As of today, he's the best running back to me. Tomorrow, it could be Ray Davis, or Jonathan Brooks, or Marshawn Lloyd, who I think is Daniel Jeremiah's number one running back. Jalen Wright's a guy that I love for the Raiders. Audric Estime is like this weird mix of like Josh Jacobs, Brandon Jacobs from back in the day on the Giants, and I don't know, like a James Conner or something. Like he's like this big running back, but he runs really well. He ran like a 4.7 140, which is not that good, but on film, like game speed, he looks good, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then Braylon Allen right below him, he's like 20 or 21 years old from Wisconsin. He's like a James Conner build, but he tries to run like a I don't know, like a who would be like a maybe a DeAndre Swift, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like his body is James Conner, but he tries to run like DeAndre Swift. And it's like if you just tried to run more like James Conner, you would be so much better. If you just full-fledged go for the power back role instead of like trying to be elusive, run through people, you know? If he actually did what his body can do, he would be top 3 for me. And maybe a running back coach can get him to be a top end running back in the league, but I don't really think so. Tyrone Tracy from Purdue is a guy that the first time I put on his tape, I was like, this is my guy. This is the guy that I'm just going to not come off of, you know? He's an ex-receiver who didn't start playing running back until like a season or two ago. And yet, for the most part, when you watch him, like he looks pretty natural as a running back. And then Rasheen Ali is a guy that I saw just recently, and Marshall's a very small school, and yet this guy, like his first cut burst is kind of insane. And I think from what I've seen, he would fit really well in a zone scheme. Which I want to say the Raiders are switching to. I could be wrong. I don't know if it's zone or gap. I keep forgetting. But Rasheen Ali is an interesting guy to maybe. Just small school, crazy burst. He's like the perfect size for a running back. Blake Watson's another guy who was an ex-receiver turned running back. I don't know what it is about Memphis running backs. I always have a thing for a Memphis running back every season in the draft. Dylan Lobby. Yeah. Dylan Lobby from New Hampshire. Think Austin Eckler, but faster and mixed with Cooper Kupp.
Like prime Austin Eckler or Austin Eckler
prime,
now?
Prime. Now, New Hampshire is a very small school, so he's beating up some, future accountants and, office workers. But granted, he's different. And he's a good kick returner too, as is Tyrone Tracy, as is Isaac Guerendo from Louisville, Will Shipley from Clemson. I would say Shipley and Bucky Irving are two guys that I'm a little lower on than most people, just because I think they're one-dimensional. They're more pass-catching, very elusive running backs, but they're smaller, and I don't think they're going to work as well as people think they are. I'm looking for more of the running backs with the proper size, like Rasheen Ali. Like, he's from a small school, but his size is perfect. And then I think he's going to be my sleepers, but Kamani Vidal is a guy that I really like. Troy, not the biggest school. George Halani from Boise State's another guy that's just like really being slept on. And then towards the bottom, I mean, you have Isaiah Davis is a guy that you were kind of looking at before.
Yeah, I was looking at Isaiah Davis during the combine, and like literally, sort of like what Mike's kind of going on. None of the running backs really, jump out like in years prior. But when I was watching Isaiah Davis, I swear he passes the eye test, whereas maybe his numbers don't support like him being. I mean, he's probably going to go undrafted. Given that there's this many running backs, that I mean, if we're starting like these, 3 out of these 4 guys are going to be third round talents. I don't know. Isaiah Davis might be a guy that can sign to a practice squad and be sort of like an Elijah Mitchell. Not
Right.
necessarily the same skill set as Elijah Mitchell, but just like coming onto a team that I want to say Mitchell was either a late round pick or undrafted. I'm pretty sure he was undrafted,
Mm.
but just coming onto a team and surprising people. He may never be a starter in the NFL, but he was probably the most impressive running back that I saw doing some of those combine drills on like might have been day 2, or whatever day the running backs went on, and they were doing like all the bag drills. I was like, wow, Isaiah Davis was impressive in my opinion. Other people might view it differently, who are like actual experts at looking at the combine, but
yeah, which I have to preface, I am definitely not a draft expert. So all this stuff that I'm saying, I could rank these guys like the running backs and wide receivers. I could be dead wrong. I could be dead wrong about the quarterbacks, just like the GMs can. All of this is a crapshoot. Granted, this is my favorite time of the year, so I love going all out for this stuff. I love doing this right now. As far as Isaiah Davis, he was kind of the first prospect that I really looked at besides, during the season, like Jaden Daniels, Marvin Harrison Jr., Caleb Williams, the top guys. But Isaiah Davis was a guy like during the bowl games, my grandpa texted me. I was at work and I get a text from him like, hey, you should check out the running back from South Dakota State. And I was like, really? Like South Dakota State? Okay. And I was like, shit, he didn't even say the name. Like he didn't catch his name. He's just like, you got to check out this running back. I was like, all right. And I look up the roster. I'm like, is it number 34? He's like, no. I'm like, 22? He's like, maybe. I'm like, Isaiah Davis? He's like, yeah, that's him. I watched him. I don't know what it is. Like, again, this is the same sort of situation where it's like he's playing against very much lesser talent. And it's this weird thing with him. Maybe it's the cameras. I don't know. He looks both faster than everybody, all while looking slow at the same time. Like he's not fast. But what I noticed with him is his vision, and I think his contact balance is like really good. And I can totally see him being like a Philip Lindsay, undrafted guy that comes in, and if he goes to the right situation, he could be a starter for a year or two, But I really see him as like probably a third running back on rosters, and he might start off like a practice squad guy, but I think at some point someday he'll get his chance, And then just to finish out at running back, Jaden Sheridan, another small school guy, kind of the thing down here from Monmouth. Kind of a joystick running back. Kind of like almost reminds me, but probably better. Kind of reminds me of Tariq Cohen, but mixed with who would he mix with? Like Kenyon Drake or something,
I just want to provide an update. I might have mentioned that Elijah Mitchell might have been undrafted or he was a late pick. I can confirm he was a 6th round pick in 2021.
Okay, there you go. So Jaden Sheridan is interesting to me. I don't know if he'll get drafted, but I'm going to be keeping an eye out on him. And then, of course, I can't go without mentioning Frank Gore Jr. Obviously, I have him ranked pretty low. I think he's kind of small. He's very fast, at least compared to his competitors. He has a lot of breakaway runs, which tells me that he has breakaway speed, which is a good thing to have. And he has good vision. I just think he doesn't quite have, and it's not fair to compare him to his dad, but I don't think he has that always fall forward sort of play style that his dad had. And, he's coming from Southern Missouri or Mississippi, wherever his school is. And I think it's just called Southern Miss, actually.
Yeah, I think it's Mississippi. But One thing I will say is I can almost guarantee that if Frank Gore Jr. is not drafted, he's going to be a 49er. They're going to sign him to to try and earn a spot during training camp. I can already see it. Frank
I would
Gore
have to.
works in the front office. It's going to be a
Oh,
family affair.
there you go. Yep. I would have to imagine they will definitely offer him, and that would make sense. That's a good point that he works there. I was going to say like Miami because I know they're from Miami, I want to say. I could see him trying to go to like a hometown sort of thing, but yeah, the Niners make the most sense.
Yeah, no, the fans are gonna love it. Frank Gore is gonna love
Oh,
it.
yeah.
I'm sure
Oh,
Frank
yeah.
Gore Jr. is gonna love it. I mean, who knows if he would make the team, but he might make the practice squad. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, yeah, they might keep him on the practice squad, and
I could see him fitting Shanahan offense. He's got speed. They like their speed backs.
He could be like a replacement for Mitchell or Jordan Mason. Although Jordan Mason's like more of a physical runner, and Mitchell has been sort of like the speed guy.
Yeah, and actually, I will say this right now while it's still in my mind. I intended to put see how like safety, there's like just a little bit of players there, like center,
Yeah.
And I intended to put a position spot, whatever you want to call that, like safety, where it says returners, like kick returners. And I wanted to note who are kick returners in this draft because as of this year with the rule change, it's going to be more important. I could see Frank Gore Jr. being a kick returner. I don't know if he was at Southern Miss, but some of these other guys at running back like Isaac Garendo, Dylan Lobby, Will Shipley, and a few others, as well as wide receivers and a few corners, they're going to get a little bit of a bump because they can kick, they can return kicks now. So
yeah. And then another thing I want to say about Frank Gore Jr. is that it has happened in the NFL before. Even I want to say it was just last year, Deuce Vaughn on the Cowboys. I think his dad works for the Cowboys.
Yep.
And I think when he got, I think he got cut, right? He got
Deuce Vaughn.
I want to say he didn't make the team, or maybe he did make the team, and his dad was the one who told him that he made the team. Or
his dad was the one that told him that he was getting drafted. I think he was drafted in like the 5th or 6th round. I want to say.
Yeah,
and I think he made the team because I think until he
was definitely on the roster, throughout the season, because he definitely
was
had like a couple.
As of like 2 weeks ago, he was the leading running back on the roster. Like they are the biggest running back,
starting running back.
Yeah, right now.
Yeah.
So, last thing at running back here is Sione Vaki from Utah. I have him at the bottom only because he's not only a running back but also a safety. So I could see him being a big-time special teamer in the league. But now we can move on to wide receiver.
Oh, boy. Niners are going to trade Brandon Ayuk for Marvin Harrison Jr.
Man, that would be nuts. I think if you guys were to trade Brandon Ayuk, you'd probably be looking more along the lines of like Adonai Mitchell, Ladd McConkey, Jalen Polk, Keon Coleman, sort of Xavier Worthy, sort of area. But that would be nuts if you guys somehow magically made that work with like trading Ayuk to the Cardinals as well as your 1st round pick and somehow getting the 4th pick. But that's not going to happen. Yeah.
Is Xavier Worthy good, or is he just really fast?
So, yeah, I was going to get there. My ranking for him is low compared to consensus. And from what I noticed,
Al Davis would be ashamed of you.
I mean, there are other wide receivers in this draft class that seem faster than him. His game speed does not compare to his 4.21 record-breaking 40. It just, to me, that seems like a red flag when the guy that runs the fastest 40 isn't able to like break away very often for big touchdowns. Like I see these other receivers catch the ball, they make one move, And once they start accelerating, they are gone. Xavier Worthy, it's like every time he catches a pass and he's got defenders near him, he's getting tackled for sure. The only time he doesn't is when he's running a fade. And I don't care for that. I want guys who can create after the pass, or like at running back, I want guys who can create after the
catch.
blocks have after the blocks have been made at the line of scrimmage, after first contact, yards after contact, I want running backs that can produce after that first touch. I want wide receivers who can produce after they catch the pass. I don't think Xavier Worthy is really that guy. So he's lower for me.
So tell me about Marvin Harrison Jr.
Well, Harrison Jr., there's really not much to say that's already been said, or that hasn't already been said for Harrison, Neighbors, and Odunze. They're the cream of the crop, Some people have Neighbors at number 1. I think they're kind of overthinking it. Like, yes, he's super explosive, but Marvin Harrison, dude, his production is godly. And he's going to make the Cardinals a very happy team. And he's going to make Kyler Murray a very happy quarterback. At least that's the way that they should go, If they allow Marvin Harrison to go to the Chargers, dude, oh my goodness. Granted, I really do believe the Chargers are going offensive tackle one way or another. But I think if Marvin Harrison's there at 5, you can't pass that up,
Mm-hmm.
But Marvin Harrison is kind of the do-it-all receiver. I think some have compared him to like AJ Green in his prime, which is a pretty damn good player to be, compared to. Malik Neighbors is like kind of the Jamar Chase, possibly more explosive. And then Rome Odunze is like, I've heard a lot of people compare him to Devontae Adams. Okay. That might be a stretch, but I don't know who else to compare him to. So sure.
Mm-hmm.
He's sure-handed as hell. That's for sure. So I don't mind it. Brian Thomas Jr., deep threat. He's probably like Brian Thomas Jr. is probably what people think Xavier Worthy is, at least the people that are hyping up Xavier Worthy.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe if you could trade up, Brian Thomas Jr. could be a guy that you could target. I think Brian Thomas Jr. is kind of the guy that everybody's matching the Bills with right now, because the Bills traded Stephon Diggs. I think Brian Thomas Jr. or Adonai Mitchell would be kind of the targets for the Bills with Josh Allen. Adonai Mitchell is like this physical specimen. I've just heard, I think it was him, unless it was Xavier Worthy, it might have been both of them. But I've heard a few people say that sometimes when they know, or he knows that he's not getting the ball, he doesn't really try to sell the route,
Oh, Amari Cooper?
I guess Amari Cooper did that. I'm not going to get upset about it. I don't remember that. Does he do that?
I swear I've seen on a couple occasions where it's a run play and you can tell Amari Cooper's not going to get the ball. And Amari Cooper's not the only wide receiver in the NFL who does that. There are plenty of wide receivers. Like, it's all over the place because, they're so rich and like don't have to play for anything. And then like you can really tell who like the wide receivers are who are really about it and really love blocking.
Yeah. Let's see here. Let me I wanted to kind of show my guys at the end, but I gotta do this. Right here is my next my guy that I'm going to reveal, which is Ricky Pearsall, Florida. This dude is a savage. Well, I mean, I can also show this. I mean, this is a little too easy, but I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr. is just too good not to be my guy, But Ricky Pearsall is he's a do-it-all guy. He has this play where, I don't know, it was like a wheel route, I think, that he ran. And the quarterback, I don't know his name, kind of threw it up and above him. he's got like 2 or 3 defenders surrounding him, coming towards him because the ball is coming. And Pearsall just turns his head, puts one hand up, and just grabs the thing like Odell style, pulls it in as he's getting hit. It's one of the most insane catches I've ever seen. Yeah. Point being, Pearsall is a guy I think I'm a little higher on than most people. But I see it with him. I see explosion, number one receiver potential with him,
Mm-hmm.
and that could be a guy the Niners could target if things were to go that way.
Yeah. If they're not trading Ayuk, I don't want them to take a receiver at all.
Oh, I don't blame you. Yeah. I mean, later rounds is not the worst thing to do because at some point with their kind of cap strickenness, if not next year, the following year, they're going to have to let what's the slot receiver's name? Super Bowl hero.
Jennings.
Yeah, at some point, Juwan Jennings is going to go. So I could see them going for a slot receiver, which actually leads me to Ladd McConkey. McConkey, dude, I think McConkey is a rich man's Hunter Renfrow. Like, everything everybody loved about Hunter Renfrow, multiply it by 2 and give him some more speed. Ladd McConkey is nice. Keon Coleman is sort of your big body receiver type. Jalen Polk from Washington, another like sure-handed receiver. So many passes where he's just like plucking the ball out of the air. I'm just like, oh my gosh. I already spoke about Xavier Worthy. Troy Franklin is like this really exciting deep threat from Oregon. Which, interestingly, when I'm watching Troy Franklin, I'm like, well, maybe I know Troy Franklin. Yeah, maybe Bo Nix can throw deep, and I'm just like overreacting to how efficient he is short yardage wise. But granted, like Bo Nix doesn't have nearly the arm that these other quarterbacks have. I didn't really get to talk Bo Nix, but basically, I just think Bo Nix is like end of career Drew Brees, And I just think, I said in the group chat today, I think Bo Nix is going to be a guy that's going to come in and sure, he can start for a couple seasons for a team. He might even be good. He might even be really efficient. He might be like Derek Carr at his peak at times. But also, like, his arm talent is just not there for him to last. And I think what's going to end up happening with Bo Nix is he's going to be a high-end backup quarterback. That's just what I feel for him. Roman Wilson is another slot receiver. I think some people view him as like kind of the underrated top slot receiver in this year's class. Because I don't know if some view Ladd McConkey as an outside receiver or not, but I would figure he's more of a slot guy. Granted, Roman Wilson is like, if it's not Rome Odunze, apparently Roman Wilson is like the most sure-handed receiver in this class. Jacob Cowing from Arizona is a guy that I think I'm a little higher on than most people. I just really like what I see from him. He's just the type of receiver that I really like to see, And along with that is Javon Baker from UCF. Sort of the same thing. Just he kind of does it all. Really sure-handed. Playmaker, and even Malik Washington, same thing. Like, I kind of have these guys all grouped together because I think Cowing is kind of the fastest of these three, but they're all pretty sure-handed guys that make plays, And I think if a team were to go into the third, fourth, fifth round and be able to get one of these guys, they'd be really happy. You might even be looking at like, specifically with Cowing, you might be looking at like this year's Tank Dell in a sort of different way, And then Malachi Corley, Jalen McMillan from Washington, another sure-handed guy. Like I've already said, Michael Penix had a lot of surrounding talent on that offense. And that's kind of my one big thing with him. I don't care about the injuries in the past. He's been healthy for 2 years. but the surrounding talent is what kind of gets me, where it's like, okay, in the NFL, he's going to have a harder time. Is that going to affect him? Well, to me, for Michael Penix, and the reason why he's one of my top choices at quarterback is because he, even with all of that talent, he got the ball out the fastest of, I think, any quarterback in college football, which is, what NFL quarterbacks do. They have to get the ball out quick. And the fact that he can do that while also being one of the highest efficiency deep passers in college football, to me, is really impressive.
So the next name is very interesting to me because I've seen people higher on Xavier Legette than you are. Do you care to run us by why?
Actually, both Malachi Corley and Xavier Legette are two guys that I'm a little lower on. I think with these guys, a lot of people are watching their highlights and whatnot and going, "Oh my God!" I mean, Malachi Corley. I've heard so many people say he's the next Deebo Samuel. I'm sorry, no, he's not. You can try it, sure. He's hard to tackle. I don't even know what WKU stands for. It's a small school. And I'm not trying to offend any.
Is that Western Kentucky?
I think that's probably what that is, yeah. Yes, because I think KU is Kentucky in my thing here. But he doesn't have the build of Deebo Samuel at all. Maybe he could grow into that, but when I see Malachi Corley, I think more like, I guess, a poor man's Tank Dell.
Deebo. Oh, Tank Dell.
Yeah. That's what I see. I don't see him like Deebo at all. I don't foresee him rushing out of the backfield, Maybe jet sweeps, absolutely, but he's not going to be sitting at running back randomly on any given play, And yes, he makes plays, but I don't see it as much as everybody else does. I hope I'm wrong, I guess, especially if he ends up being a Raider, but I don't know. And then Xavier Legette is I think this was the hardest one for me because I wanted to put him as high as I actually at one point I had him as high as Xavier Worthy. I did. But this is sort of like sciencey, if you will. But I listened to this one podcast, and one of their prospect tendencies, if you will, that they really care about is breakout age. And basically, if players break out at 19, 18, 17 years old, that's a really good sign that they're going to be good. But if players break out at 22, 23, 24, it's that rarely ends out being a good thing for their career. Xavier Legette was not a starter until this season, 2023. He was completely supplanted, never targeted up until this past season. Granted, this past season, he was a monster. And I think the comparison easily for him is DK Metcalf. Easily. That's when I was talking about Xavier Worthy of when he catches the ball, he doesn't break away and go for a touchdown if somebody's near him. Xavier Legette is that guy. He catches the pass. He could have two guys coming in on him. Pause. He will find a way to run around them and score a 60-yard touchdown. If Xavier Legette works in the NFL, again, I hope he does. If he works in the NFL, he is going to be fun to watch, and he's going to be fun to have on your fantasy team. But based off of that little sciencey thing that I've heard, my gut tells me he's going to be one of those guys that's how did that not work out? And it just doesn't work out.
He's going to go to the Rams.
If he goes to the Rams, it'll work out.
Yeah.
Honestly.
So going back to Malachi Corley, could you see him shooting up rankings with the kickoff rule change?
See, I don't know if he return kicks. I think he has the capability to, though. I could definitely see an NFL team, trying him out as a kick returner for sure. You know, um, I think actually the guy that I want to say was a kick returner was actually Xavier Worthy. Funny enough, I'm trying to see if there's any other wide receivers that I remember being kick returners. Roma Dunze returned a punt for a touchdown. It was pretty damn good. But I'm not seeing anybody else here that was like specifically kick returners. I'll just kind of quickly finish up on wide receiver, and then honestly, the rest of the way should be a lot quicker. Tez Walker, deep threat. Jermaine Burton, deep threat. Brendan Rice, Jerry Rice's son, deep threat. I just kind of bunched them together. Tez Walker was catching passes from Drake May, and it looked really good. Like I think I'm lower on him than consensus. I think he can be a really good player, but it just felt to me like it was a lot of the same thing of like outside the numbers fades, and it's not a bad thing. I just wanted to see a little bit more, I guess. Tremaine Burton, I guess I'll spoil it now. He's one of my sleepers from Alabama. Antonio Pierce talked about wanting to get speed on the offense. I think Jermaine Burton's a guy that they can go get in like hopefully like the 5th round, and he could just make a difference.
Hey, Antonio Pierce says he wants speed on the offense. You would lose your mind live on this show if they draft Xavier Worthy with their 1st round pick.
Yes, I would. There's not many picks, I think. Well, actually, there's probably many. I mean, most of these players on this board, if they pick first at 13 overall, I would lose my mind. But, yeah, I mean, wide receiver period would piss me off.
We're really gonna need we'll be right back.
Yeah, just cut as a what the and then we'll be right back.
Yeah, like the Eric Andre thing where like they like pause it and it's like dun, 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 dun. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, Brendan Rice, Jerry Rice's son, he's solid. I thought like my opinion until I had like actually watched him. I don't know why I thought like he was like USC's like 3rd receiver, but I think he was their number 2, maybe even number 1. I'm not sure, but my opinion was like, oh, he's just like Jerry Rice's son who kind of got a spot at USC, and he's like whatever. But no, he's solid. He's a good deep threat. And then honestly, the rest of these wide receivers, I don't have many thoughts on. The last 2, Aeneas Smith and Tulu Griffin, are definitely kick and punt returners that can get a little bump because of that. And then, of course, above them is Luke McCaffrey, the brother of Christian McCaffrey. And I think he's solid. Like he's kind of a sleeper, I would say. I just think, coming out of Rice and being kind of a small receiver, I'm not sure how I feel about him, but I think he could be a fun slot receiver for somebody.
Luka McCaffrey is interesting. So I brought up the possibility of Frank Gore Jr., being an undrafted player who goes to the 49ers. What are the odds that the 49ers just make this a whole family ordeal? And let's just say Frank Gore Jr., Brendan Rice, and Luke McCaffrey all go undrafted. Not that they would. I'm sure that most of the receivers here are going to be drafted. I don't know about running backs. But do you think the 49ers would be interested in making a family ordeal for like multiple positions? This is like the one time in, who knows how long it'll be where they can like draft multiple like family members.
Yeah. I mean, and Jerry Rice is always like he's at the games quite a bit.
Yeah, no, he's pretty plugged in with the team. He's like you said, he's at the game. I mean, he's still running routes and catching passes at the games. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Jerry Rice is a Niner like through and through. Luke McCaffrey, brother Christian McCaffrey, and then Frank Gore. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that they would fit any needs. In fact, like I would say that this is probably like the one draft where the Niners don't need receiver, and like I think they could use Frank Gore Jr.
Hmm.
But if these guys somehow go undrafted, why not bring them in? Why not bring them into camp?
Yeah. I actually just revealed one of my Niner fits, which is Brendan Rice out of USC. I
Very good.
think if you're looking for a deep threat at wide receiver, why not take the GOAT's son?
One thing I'll say is I've seen like Brendan Rice catch deep passes from Caleb Williams. I think it was like during the pro day, and then I don't know what it was, but it just looked like you know it was violent running, and not efficient running. With him going all the way down the field. Obviously, like the pass was caught, but like I don't know. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like when there's people who just run smoothly, and there's people who like really have to like get on their high horse in order to really
Oh,
you know
I think
get
the
to
perfect
top speed.
example. I think the perfect example is like Christian McCaffrey versus
Oh
uh
my God, I know who you're gonna say.
the
The
Chiefs
Chiefs
running
running
back
back. Yeah,
Pacheco.
uh,
Pacheco.
yeah.
Yep.
I don't know. It looks so violent, and then
Yeah.
funny thing about Pacheco, I always like laugh when I think of him because I think about like that one time you texted in the fantasy group chat. You're like, Pacheco runs like a try hard, and then Joey and I we just like always joke about that. We're like, yeah, he should really tone it down a little bit. Like,
Yeah.
of course he's gonna be trying hard, but you get what I mean though, and I know what you mean. I know what you mean
Yeah.
about like the whole. It just looks seamless when they run. The strides and everything, and then somebody's but
Yeah.
but but Brendan
Yep.
Rice was like more like it just didn't look as fluid, and I'm pretty sure that's probably a reason why he's like sliding down draft boards, because he used to be kind of like mentioned a lot, but I haven't heard a lot of talk of him like lately. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah. For being Jerry Rice's son, he's kind of under the radar.
yeah.
But I'd say we can move on to center.
All right.
Um, I really only have thoughts about the top three. I think like the top five are worthy centers that will likely start in the NFL. I'll start at the third guy, Tanner Bortolini. He's basically, I wouldn't call him a plug and play, but at least not for sure. But he is a multi-positional, flexible guy that you can draft and feel comfortable about having, whether he's your number two at guard and center, or he might be a starter for you at one of your guard spots or even as your center. That's
Mm-hmm.
a great guy to draft. That's a great guy to draft. I think he might be looked at as like a third-ish rounder. I'd be excited if the Raiders were to draft him. I would be looking at him more as a guard, or the backup center, but we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
And then Zach Frazier, I want to say both Zach Frazier and Jackson Powers Johnson, but for sure Zach Frazier out of West Virginia is not only a great center with great hand usage and probably a great base, great power, everything. He's an ex-wrestler. How would you like to have an ex-wrestler badass as your starting center?
All right, call up John Cena. Let's go. No, I'm playing. I know what you mean, like an actual wrestler, not
Yeah.
not like
Well, just
WWE.
being able to utilize that, those capabilities, the way that his body has been trained for that against other human beings on a play-by-play basis. Like I feel that like that's really good to have.
Yeah, I think wrestlers have such a like, especially on the offensive line, they have such an advantage. When it comes to like being able to control your body over people who didn't do
Yep.
wrestling. Like I didn't do
Yep.
wrestling. I didn't do wrestling in high school, but like I was teammates with a couple guys who did wrestling. One of them being Lorenzo in our fantasy league, and Lorenzo took like the biggest jump, like the biggest improvement from like freshman year to senior year, and he was like wrestling all throughout. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I like Zach Frazier. I mean, I'll spoil it right now. Both of these top two centers, because I feel it's a massive need for the Niners. Both Jackson Powers Johnson and Zach Frazier. I think especially Zach Frazier, I view as big time fits for the Niners.
Mm-hmm.
And Powers Johnson he's my favorite center in this draft. He's just a brick wall. His hands are super strong. His base is super strong. I really like what I see for him.
Mm-hmm.
And we can move on to the rest of the interior offensive line.
All right. Now, tell me about Troy Fatanu, because I've been hearing his name a lot. I hope I pronounced that right.
I think you did. Some people say Fatnu. I don't know what the proper pronunciation is. But again, with Michael Penix having good surrounding cast, this is a guy who I think everybody is starting to feel is definitely the number one interior lineman. Some might have Graham Barton above him. Some might have Jackson Powers Johnson above him. But Troy Fatanu, what's most interesting about him, and I would say the same for Graham Barton, is that they can play all five positions on the line. And, Troy Fatanu is being projected as high as 10th overall to the Jets. When you have a guy that's worthy of the 10th overall pick and he can play any position on your offensive line, that's massive. That's a massive positional advantage to have, in my opinion, to have that versatility, to just plug and play wherever your hole is and put the best starting five on the field. Somebody's going to draft him and be elated. I think he's one of the most agile athletes on the offensive line in this draft. So, and then Graham Barton, the exact same thing could be said about Graham Barton. I don't know. I don't really know what the knock is on him, honestly. He absolutely destroyed the combine. I'm pretty sure his tape is like relatively flawless, for lack of a better term. Just for some reason, he's hanging around like the 20s and not, the teens as far as mock drafts go. He played left tackle the past like 2 seasons. Before that, I think he was a guard. Could be wrong. But everybody, as far as draft experts go, project him as a guard, and he can even be a top-notch center in the league. Some would even say he would be the number one center if you put him at center. I have this. It's not really a running theory, but just this thought crossed my mind the other day of like, what if the Raiders took Graham Barton and just shocked everybody? Let's say Fatanu's off the board, or Fatanu's not really their guy and they like Barton more, whatever it may be. Everybody's projecting Barton to go, let's say 23 to 31 overall, right?
Mm-hmm.
What if the Raiders take him at 13 and they say, you are going to be our starting right tackle, and if not, you're going to be our starting right guard, and that's going to be perfectly fine, because he can be a starting right tackle, and I think he'd probably be great. I think people just look at him as an interior offensive lineman because his arms aren't quite as long as you might want from a tackle.
Mm-hmm.
That's about it for him as far as maybe negatives. But I don't know. It was just a little theory that I had of like, oh man, what if they took him because he's just that good, But I think the positional value and the draft value would tell most GMs pick the tackle, not the guard. So if he's viewed as a guard, they should take a tackle,
Yeah.
But I think Graham Barton he looks the part as far as a 13th overall pick.
Mhm.
So I won't have as many thoughts for most of these guys moving forward. I'll just have quick thoughts. Jordan Morgan, I thought he was an offensive tackle. I thought he was a left tackle, but they have him as a guard. Most of
Mhm.
these, draft experts, so it's probably a similar feeling towards Barton. But I've heard some people that I follow that say that he's a really, really good blocker. So I'm definitely intrigued to see where he goes. He could be a target for the Niners, honestly.
Yeah, I've heard
Um,
Jordan Morgan's name, thrown around a couple times
yeah,
in Niner land. So
yeah, yeah.
another
No, from what I've
guy
heard,
that I've heard, and we'll get to that when we get to the tackles. I'm gonna guess that he's on your 49er fits. But continue on
okay,
with Christian
okay.
Haynes.
Christian Haynes is, I think, the offensive guard that I'm most like, please somehow slip to the Raiders in the third round.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's probably a second round pick, but if he can make it to the Raiders' third round pick, oh my gosh, day one starter at right guard. Day one starter. And then Cooper Beebe is probably the same way, or Beebe, however you say his last name. He was PFF's highest rated interior offensive lineman in college football. I don't know if he was a left guard or right guard, but if he's the PFF highest graded offensive guard, I'll take it.
Mm-hmm.
Dominic Puny, I've I have read that some view him as a center, and some say he could be the best center in this draft for all we know, because again, the draft is a crapshoot. But at the very least, he's a very, very good interior offensive line prospect. Christian Mahogany was a guy that kind of stood out to me at the Senior Bowl, along with guys like Jackson Powers Johnson and Talisi Fuaga.
Is
Which is
BC
always
Boston College?
yes, yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. Um, but yeah, I the Senior Bowl is like my favorite bowl game as far as like the All-Star games and whatnot. Like I think usually the Senior Bowl is very telling, especially for like receivers, corners, and offensive and defensive linemen.
Mm-hmm.
And then Mason McCormick was a guy from South Dakota State who I want to say like in the combine tested really well as far as like athletically, but also has really good tape. And he'd be blocking for Isaiah Davis. So
Mm-hmm.
Mason McCormick is I'm pretty sure, right? Yeah, South Dakota State. Mason McCormick's an interesting guy. And then I think the last guy, Isaiah Adams, I've seen some people really high on him out of Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think I've seen a couple people view Delmore Glaze as a tackle. I'm not sure. And then Zach Zinter from Michigan, I want to say, is coming off an injury. And had he not come off an injury, he'd probably be higher. And that's about all I have for the interior offensive line. The rest of the guys below them are kind of sleepers. So,
All right. So we're ready to move on to offensive tackle.
Yes, sir.
All right. Tell me about
Yes,
Joe Alt.
Joe Alt, I essentially, for the most part, have not watched him because I know that the Raiders are not going to get him.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's just a pencil in at 7th overall pick, and he very well might be the 5th overall pick to the Chargers. But from what I've heard, he's a day one starter at left or right tackle. And he's one of the top probably 6 or 7 prospects as far as like just bank on him to be good, if not great, but day one to be good. So he's one of the most pro ready players in this class, and give him a full season and off season, I think he's going to be a stud.
Could he be the next Mike McGlinchey?
Yeah, I know, because he's from Notre Dame.
Yeah, but
I
also
think he's
too
much better.
Also, Mike McGlinchey was kind of taken ahead of Colton Miller because Colton Miller was more of a project player, and McGlinchey was like ready to play. And then so if Joe Alt's going to be like a plug and play kind of player. Next, Mike McGlinchey. Huh?
Well, I think the way that I would compare it is Mike McGlinchey was the plug and play right tackle in that draft, and there was nobody else nearly ready to be starting day one. And yet Colt Miller was thrown out into the fire at left tackle.
Mm-hmm.
But this season, you have, I'm counting at least 6 offensive tackles that are first-round talents. And Joe Alt has never been looked at as the number 2. At least not since the draft draft season has really progressed since like January. So I think that's all pretty telling. Like if you can keep yourself ahead of 5 other guys who are bona fide first-round talents, and at that, like not all of them, but for the most part, like day one starters, again, I think that's pretty telling. Whereas if you put this draft class along with Mike McGlinchey, there's a high likelihood McGlinchey's like the 4th or 5th tackle.
Yeah.
Probably 5th. So yeah, that's kind of what I have on Joe Alt. To the Chargers or Titans or whoever trades up to get him, good for you, basically. My number 2, this is the one I think ranking that's more my ranking than consensus, but the rest of this way, it's going to be like 99% consensus rankings. Even center and interior offensive line was like consensus rankings.
Now you're saying for defense too is like a lot of consensus?
Yeah. I'm mostly putting this consensus together just for visual aid, and then we'll have my sleepers, team fits, and all that. But Fuaga's one of my guys. On my guys list up there to the left, he's going to be on there. If he's sitting there at 13, I know I'm running the card in, but I just don't know if the Raiders are. I don't know if they're going to freak out and go, "Oh, we got to take Penix," and then maybe they look to trade up for a Tyler Guyton at the end of the round 1. That could work if you want to play it safe with the quarterback selection. But my issue with Guyton is he's not the safe prospect, in my opinion, that Fuaga is, or even Fashanu or J.C. Latham. I think those 3 guys are absolutely worthy of that 13th overall pick. Marius Mims, well, I'm not going to skip. Fashanu's the guy that can start left tackle or right tackle, from what it sounds like. He had a better season in 22 than 23, but he's still, top prospect. And then J.C. Latham is this hulking right tackle prospect that some view as the clear-cut number 2. Some, like in this view, as the number 4. I'm not going to lie, like, my eyeballs tell me he's really, really good, and he's going to be a good right tackle, if not great. And if the Raiders take him at 13, I'm going to feel pretty good. But sometimes you hear people say, don't scout the helmet, scout the player. This is one of those cases where I go, oh, right tackle from Alabama. Not good. Alex Leatherwood.
I was just going to say, it worked out the last time, didn't it?
It did not. And I think previous offensive tackles from Alabama have been not very good, And I think J.C. Latham is a different case where he's going to be good. But, man, I mean, if he somehow doesn't work out, like, that's just a bad rap. Like, they need to stop with these offensive tackles from Alabama. I saw somebody say, like, J.C. Latham reminds them of like Andres Pete, which is not really the best thing to say, apparently. So, I mean, you're hoping from one of these top 15 picks, like they're going to be a perennial star player on your team, Pro Bowler, helping you win games. And a guy like Andres Pete is just like let him hit the market free agent, Like, you want your guy to be a Pro Bowler, and I think Talisi Fuaga is probably your best bet at that. at right tackle in this draft class.
Okay, so an interesting prospect is Amarius Mims because, correct me if I'm wrong, he's the prospect who has only played, I believe, in like 6 or 8 games in college.
8 games. He has
8
only played
games?
in 8 games due to injury and I guess just being really raw.
Mm.
Granted, I have stats on him that they blew me away, dude. Let's see if I can find it. Okay, here it is. So in 2023, stats/rankings. Obviously, well, this ranks out of 200 qualifying offensive tackles. I'm assuming it's based off of snap percentage or something because obviously he only played like 8 games, if not less. The pressure percentage allowed 1.19% was first in college football. Sack percentage 0%, first in college football. Blown block percentage, I'm assuming the P in parentheses means pass blocking, 0.67%, first in college football. Penalty percentage 0%, so he had 0 penalties, first in college football. Blown block percentage, I'm assuming this is for run blocking, 1.08%, that's ninth. PFF blocking, 74.8, I'm assuming that's overall. 26th, which is not so good, I guess, but it's still green on this chart. PFF pass blocking, 78.8, 33rd, which is still green, solid. And then PFF run blocking, 68.4, which is 64th. Obviously not so good, but still in green. And then blown block percentage, this one's in run, so I guess this is the rushing, is 1.55%, which is 112th, which is in yellow. So that's his worst stat. Is clearly he's a great pass blocker, not the best run blocker. And I think where that comes from is he's super fucking raw to the point where he doesn't really know what to do when he has to like move, you know? But when he's pass blocking, it's just like he's literally the Hulk, and all he has to do is just see guy, block guy, you know? Whereas like in run blocking, it's like you have certain lanes or gaps that you have to get, and he might not get that yet. He is the prospect to me. He might be the most interesting prospect in this draft, period. Like, if some team could draft him in the 20s and coach him up and get him to his fullest potential, I think he might have the highest likelihood of anybody in this class to be a Hall of Famer.
I was just going to say, I feel like Mims is like the prospect in the draft that is just like the biggest risk because of the lack of games, lack of experience.
Yep.
But like he is probably, like you said, the most interesting, most intriguing. I think like the most exciting pick because it's like, when he has played, he's shown a bunch of promise, and he seems like a player that can be molded into, if you just teach him how to run block. Like, let me just say, it's much easier to teach somebody how to run block than to pass block because pass blocking, you either have the footwork or you don't. Like,
right.
Mike McGlinchey, since we just brought him up, a little while ago, Mike McGlinchey could run block, but like in his couple of years with the 49ers and even with the Broncos, he never developed the proper footwork to be able to protect, the quarterback consistently. It was always like, getting tossed around, he wouldn't maintain a wide base, slide his feet properly. Some of that, dude, it's just like, if you have that, that's the hard part to learn. You know what I mean? Just like,
right.
Yeah. So it's like the biggest mystery box. It's like that is not a player you would want to trade up for, because if you miss on him,
you look like an idiot.
You look like an idiot.
Yep. He only played 8 games. What were they thinking?
He's the type of player where, with those concerns, if he fell in the draft and a team takes him and he looks fantastic, everybody's going to say, well, why the hell didn't my team draft him? Like, if like let's just say he goes to the Seahawks and he's fantastic, it's going to be every day with Niner fans like, come on, John, come on, Kyle, what the hell was that? He was right there,
Yeah.
and just completely ignoring the fact that it was like a risk to take them, like wherever they were. But I'm not going to lie, I'm going to be one of those people complaining if he does fall in the draft and it's like they could have taken him at a good spot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anywhere, I would say middle of the second round, take him.
Well, he's still being projected in the 20s right now, like first round. The team that intrigues me the most, and I heard this on a podcast, I can't say which one, I don't remember, but somebody mentioned that maybe the perfect spot for him to land would be the Bengals, because they currently have Trent Brown on a 1-year deal there. They signed him as a free agent. So you have like the literal veteran, picture perfect representation of what you want him to become in his career for him to learn from. And then after 1 year of Trent Brown, he's also injury prone. So at some point, Mims probably has to play. But you let Brown leave after a season, and then boom, Mims comes in year 2, walk up, just start and protect Joe Burrow for the rest of his career if he can continue to stay healthy. That's the main thing is with Mims, it's not only like, oh, he's only played 8 games. It's also the reason he's only played 8 games. He's been injured quite a bit. So it's not only like, oh, he's kind of the perfect moldable right tackle prospect, but it's this perfect clashing bit of like, well, he might also be injury prone. Like, I could see him falling to the second round. And honestly, the team to me that screams like they're just the type of team that would take him is the fucking Patriots. The Patriots take him and he becomes a Hall of Famer. It's like, of all teams, them, or at pick 32, the Chiefs.
God.
Yeah.
God help us.
Yep.
One thing I'll say is I could see a team like Jacksonville just taking him because they probably want to protect Trevor Lawrence, but also Trent Baalke. He likes. I want to say like there used to be like this joke where Trent Baalke is like, oh, that player has torn ACL. Oh, he's perfect. Let me get him on my team. But I think the joke comes with like players that would lose value over that. But it seems like Amarius Mims still has a tremendous value placed on him. Like,
oh yeah.
Do you think, Mike, if he would have kept up that production, he probably would have been a top 10 draft choice, huh?
I think if he stayed healthy and kept that production up, he's probably the number 2 tackle. Mm-hmm. Possibly the top tackle, but probably the number 2.
So I don't know. Keep an eye on the Jaguars. I'm not gonna like I don't know who they have at tackle right now, but like, just knowing Trent Baalke, there was a story that came out recently about when they like the year after the Super Bowl, that they lost the Ravens. Trent Baalke was like asked if he knew like who the pick was going to be, or asked a question about the pick, and Trent Baalke's like, keep in mind the Niners are picking at 31. He goes, oh yeah, I know exactly who we're picking. I actually wrote his name down on an envelope and it's in my desk.
Yeah.
And that draft pick ended up being AJ Brown, or not AJ Brown, AJ Jenkins, who like was a massive reach by the Niners at the time, and he never played a single snap in the NFL.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man. I definitely think that Baalke loves risky picks, but let's move on to the next tackle.
Tyler Guyton. I think from here on out, I'm definitely not going to have as much to say, but Guyton is a guy who I think is maybe a smarter offensive tackle than, say, Amarius Mims, but he doesn't have like the anchor that you want, He's a little lighter on his feet, and he's agile. He's got the good finesse block to him, but he's not a power blocker,
Mhm.
So he's probably not a fit for some teams and a great fit for other teams. And like I said, like I could see him being a guy that maybe if the Raiders do decide to go 13 with Penix, Guyton could be, a trade back up in the first round sort of guy, or hope that he falls in the second round. But I don't know. I think I'd rather go for a guy like Roger Rosengarten or Blake Fisher or Christian Jones later in the draft.
Question: Are any of the upcoming names under the list of 49er fits?
Let me see. I do
You
have a
don't have.
lot of offensive linemen.
Mhm.
No.
Oh wow. I'm gonna go ahead and bring him up. I know he's a couple names down the list, but apparently the Niners have been like heavily tied to Roger Rosengarten.
I
And
don't know why. That
apparently,
was my gut feeling when you mentioned earlier. I don't know why, but continue.
yeah, I've been seeing like a bunch of things about like the Niners visiting with Rosengarten. Um, and I don't know. It just I could see that where they kind of reach on a guy who's maybe their guy, but if they get him in the second round, I guess I wouldn't be opposed to it. But I really think that if you can get anywhere between Joe Alt and Amarius Mims, if any of these guys are still on the board, you should probably take one of these guys in the first round.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, if you guys can, that's for sure. I feel like I know you. I think you feel that right tackle was a big need for this team.
Yeah.
Which I would argue it is. I just think when we had our episode where we like really went over the position breakdowns, like maybe post free agency, um, my feeling looking at the roster and specifically in reaction to the Niners signing who's the right tackle?
McKivitz to an extension.
Yeah, signing Colton McKivitz to a 1-year extension, giving him 2 years total on his deal. I feel like the Niners feel that he's fine at right tackle. If they can draft a successor, they happily will, I'm sure. The wise thing for them to do is to go best player available. But my hunch is that their big need is on the interior between center and right guard. That's kind of my feeling on the Niners, but I could be off, And again, I think if the right guy is there at 31, or even the Niners decide to trade up to say 24, 21, 25, if the guy is there, absolutely. And really, in my opinion, a guy like Roger Rosengarten makes sense. And another guy that makes sense would be like Olu Fashanu, because those are guys, I don't know so much about Roger Rosengarten, but Fashanu for sure is a guy that could play left or right tackle. And
Mhm.
at some
And
point,
Trent Williams might
Trent
retire.
Williams, he's going to retire. So at some point, you have to have your successor in place if you want to keep winning, because you're going to need a left tackle.
Mhm.
And I want to say I've heard that Roger Rosengarten played left tackle before. I want to say he's primarily right tackle lately for Washington, but again, I think he did play left in the past. But I think really, I mean, this range between like Patrick Paul to like Brandon Coleman are all interesting guys. Even the guy Caden Wallace, I think is his name, just a little bit lower.
I will
You could scroll
say
down.
if the 49ers could somehow pull off like drafting an offensive lineman with their first two picks, wow,
Yeah,
that would be great.
yeah. That's basically how I feel too. Is get me a top end right tackle, and make me a happy fan.
Like if they really like Rosengarten and they take him in the second round and like go with a center or a guard in the first. I honestly think they need a lean guard over center, but they do need depth at center. Like I'm saying, they should be drafting 3 linemen in this draft,
Yeah, yeah,
and
agreed.
honestly, take 2 in the first 3 rounds.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to help you the most, right? As far as winning games. So,
Protect Brock Purdy, a guy that you're planning on paying however much money to. See, that's why the 49ers, like I kind of thought about it a little bit. That's why they should be in position to try and trade Brandon Ayuk if they can get like a mid first round pick. Because if you can trade Ayuk for a guy who's going to start on the offensive line and actually be an upgrade over guys that they have, it's worth it.
right.
You can get another receiver, and plus, you're loaded at receiver. Like, let me pull it back up. It's like, all right, you would have to draft somebody to replace Ayuk as the starter. But if you're getting a mid first round pick, you can use that mid first round pick on a tackle or an offensive lineman or even a wide receiver. And then you still have your other first round pick that you can still use.
Yeah. And I think you alluded to this earlier, but I wouldn't use it on a first round receiver. I think this receiver class is so deep, you can get a guy in the third or fourth round that can absolutely come out and play like Nico Collins last year, and just play like a total number 2 to Deebo Samuel.
Yeah, and then plus, like, I don't know. Like you said, the receiver class is deep, and then you get a guy like, the Niners got Juwan Jennings in the 7th round. Like, it doesn't have to be a first round player.
Yeah, I'm really not the biggest fan of taking receivers in the first round unless it's a guy like Marvin Harrison or Malik Neighbors or Jamar Chase,
Dude, receivers fall off so quick. Like, I was thinking about this yesterday. I was thinking like, man, Cooper Kupp was great, and then he wasn't.
Well, I mean, he got injured quite a bit in his career, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean,
but like
that Super Bowl, that season leading up to that Super Bowl win, he was the best receiver in football. I just think what did he do? He tore something, right?
Well, no. So what happened was he, I want to say, injured his ankle.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, he injured his ankle. Was out. It might have been an ankle sprain. And then he was out. Didn't return that year. And then this past offseason, it was the hamstring. And it's like, man, just like 2 years ago, Cooper Kupp was like the highest name on the market. And now it's like, he's still a good player, but he's not the same.
Yeah.
No, I don't look at him the same. Like, nobody's talking about him as like a top 5 receiver anymore. Like that happened quick.
Yeah. I mean, the fall offs, they definitely happen to the best of them. So.
Yeah.
But let's continue on OT and try to get through defense relatively quick.
Okay.
But yeah, I kind of mentioned it, but like Roger Rosengarten, Blake Fisher, Christian Jones, Javon Foster is a guy that's interesting. Those are all guys that I think are great, second, third to mid round tackles that you can get, and they can make for respectable starters at some point in their career. Other than that, I think everybody below them are sort of sleepers, besides maybe Gonclaves from Pitt.
I want to talk about Christian Jones because the 49ers have an opportunity now. If the Chiefs are going to meet them again in the Super Bowl and they're going to wreak havoc with Chris Jones, why don't we line up our own Chris Jones right across and see who's the better Chris Jones?
That would mean you'd be putting him at guard. I mean, I get Chris Jones does play on the end at times for sure. He's very adaptable, but yes,
yeah. If the Chiefs Chris Jones wants to be a real man, he'll line up wherever this Chris Jones is. How about that?
Yeah, line up on the rookie.
Yeah. Show us what you're made of, Chris Jones.
Yeah. No, Christian Jones, you will find is a guy that I really, really like. Hint. But yeah, again, Brandon Coleman's a guy that I think some view as a high-end guard, but I have him at tackle just because I think his build and combine results kind of said, well, he can play tackle, and he did play tackle at TCU. So, but again, the rest of the offensive tackle group is sort of sleepers from there on out. Besides Caden Wallace, Javon Foster, and Conclaves. So we can move up to edge defenders. Scroll up, sir. Please.
Sorry, if you guys see me laughing, I just messaged Mike something like stupid.
So edge defenders, honestly, I haven't watched too many of them. Like, there's no way after taking Tyree Wilson last year that the Raiders would be looking at Dallas Turner or Jared Verse or Laiatu Latu, in the first round. That would be like the Niners how many years ago, just going defensive end after defensive end after defensive lineman, year after year in the first round. Like, if the Raiders did that, that's one of those picks that I would be upset, because I think the plan right now is, hey, we'll see how Malcolm Kuntz does this year. Hopefully he continues his breakout and either he's worth keeping or, you let him walk and you let Tyree Wilson take his spot. And in a year from then, you get a good comp pick, either way, hopefully it's a win-win, but I'd like to keep Kuntz at the rate he's playing. But drafting a defensive end is just silly in the first round. Now, granted, if in the second round, let's say, there's a guy sitting there that you just feel is too good to be missing out on, like, say, a Marshawn Kneeland from, I don't even know what that said, maybe Eastern something probably.
Eastern Michigan?
Eastern Michigan, I think, yes. Marshawn Kneeland's a guy that I think he projects really well in the league. Like, he's a pretty big-bodied. Honestly, I'm not going to lie. When I watched him, I was like, I see a little bit of Max Crosby here. And that's saying something, where it just seems like he's got a high motor and he's got this lengthy frame to him and he's just always wreaking havoc, And then another guy down the line that I really like is Braylon Trice from Washington. Sort of a similar thing where he has like this lanky build to him, and he's a power rusher, I would say, and he applies the pressure for sure. Jonah Ellis from Utah is a guy that a lot of people have their eyes on. I want to say he's kind of a fit for the Niners from what I've read. Jalix Hunt, I might have spelled his name wrong. I'm not sure. From Houston Christian, he's a guy who's sort of like not under the radar, but like a sleeper side sort of candidate at defensive end, as is Mohamed Kamara from Colorado State. Those are some of the most interesting guys, as well as Adiza Isaac from Penn State. Some really interesting edge defenders. And then
is Kamara related to Alvin or no?
I don't think so. Also, that was something I meant to say. Jonathan Brooks from Texas, who honestly, the running back, sorry. I'm totally backtracking here just for a moment, but Jonathan Brooks from Texas is the consensus number 1 running back this year. Some might view him as a second-round pick. I watch him, and I get this weird thing, kind of a similar way to like Isaiah Davis, where it's like, I feel like you're running fast, but you look slow to me. At the same time, I see this like oddly perfect blend of Alvin Kamara and Derrick Henry put into a body, And I totally see why people have him as the number 1 running back. It's just coming off the ACL scares me. And even before the ACL, I watch his tape and I'm like, I can't tell if you're that fast or not, Like, you're clearly breaking away, but like sometimes when he's making his cuts and like making his decisions on like where to go, like it seems like he stutters or something. He's probably not. It's just like a trick of like the camera, but I'm just like, I almost wish he would do it a little faster, but maybe I'm just expecting the Alvin Kamara to come out and really it's the Derrick Henry coming out. I don't know, but I just when you mentioned Alvin Kamara, that reminded me. I had to put out. He's like a mix of Derrick Henry and Alvin Kamara. Just I don't necessarily think he's as good as either. Obviously, at their peaks.
Mm-hmm.
As far as edge defenders, Braden McGregor is a guy that a lot of people have as like a sleeper, or just at the very least a guy to watch for from Michigan. Honestly, a lot of guys from Michigan are guys worth looking at and probably to expect as difference makers in the league someday. And then Gabriel Murphy out of UCLA is sort of a big time sleeper. Tristan Kuhn is a guy who has been in on him. And on to interior defensive line. You got Byron Murphy from Texas, who some think could go in the top 10. I guess maybe the Falcons, maybe the Bears. I could see it. This is another pick that a lot of people have said, I've heard a lot of Raider fans say this. What the Raiders should really do in the first round? They should maximize Max Crosby's strength and pick a defensive tackle in the first round. And I'm just sitting there like, what are we talking about? We just paid Christian Wilkins top dollar on a 4-year contract to maximize Max Crosby. We re-signed Adam Butler. We re-signed our nose tackle, John Jenkins. You have Tyree Wilson sliding in at defensive tackle in certain plays. Why would we draft a D tackle in the first round when we have Christian Wilkins, who is clearly going to be ahead of him at all times? I get that you can have 2 D tackles on the play at any given time, but I think the second D tackle should be a guy like Adam Butler or a nose tackle like John Jenkins, and not a guy that you hope to be the next Christian Wilkins. That just seems like getting a little ahead of yourself, The first round pick, I understand best player available, but you need to also bring in needs. What do we need to do? We need quarterback. We need right tackle. We need corner. Give me one of those. Don't give me an interior defensive lineman. If you want to give me an interior defensive lineman in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round, be my guest, because there are some great options. But first, second round, I'm going to give you a hard pass for the Raiders. Granted, the second guy on the list at interior defensive line, Johnny Newton, formerly known as Jerzon Newton, I want to say, I think is an option for the Niners at 31 if they want to do their typical defensive tackle pick.
I mean, I just all right. I've been hearing, I've been listening to Grant Cohn kind of, talk about this. And I'm like, yeah, that's a great point. The 49ers have invested so much into their defensive line, and they get held in the Super Bowl and it doesn't get called. And literally there was not one single holding call, right? I think the only tackle or the only offensive lineman that got called for holding the entire game was Trent Williams, right? Which is kind of funny. But investing in your defensive line when holding isn't going to be called and the offense can kind of cheat, it's not a smart plan. It's smarter to invest in the offensive line, I think. Yep. And, I've always felt that way, and I'm extremely biased because I was an offensive lineman in high school. But, I think Jim Harbaugh put it best is the offensive line is the one position that doesn't require anyone else in order to be good. They are responsible for the offense doing good. You have to protect the quarterback. You got to protect, you got to create lanes for your running back. Yeah. So, I mean, all the other positions, they can be replaced, but the offensive line is the hardest. If you don't have the guy, you can't hide that.
Yep.
So.
Yep. really quick, just a couple more names in the interior defensive line. Braden Fisk, quickly, as of the combine. Yes, sir. What's up,
Joel,
Joel?
welcome back.
I am
Better late than never.
I am absolutely ready for the draft. This is my time of the year, and Thursday's going to get here quick, dude. I can't wait. But back to Braden Fisk. That was a guy, as of the combine, that quickly became one of my favorite guys in this draft. And after seeing the combine, it's like, well, let me go watch his, tape, some game tape, whatever, highlights, whatever. Oh my gosh. Like, he's not going to blow up every play, but I remember the hype for that one defensive tackle that the Chiefs took, Dontari Poe, because he ran a 40 that was like 4.8 or something like that. Can you look up while I kind of talk about maybe some other guys? Can you look up Braden Fisk's 40 time?
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not it was the fastest for a D tackle, it was like he looked like a running back. The way, like, it looked like you were talking about, like, guys who were trying way too hard.
4.78.
Yeah, beautiful. Audric Estime, I think, ran a 4.71. So you're telling me a defensive tackle can keep up with Audric Estime? That's nuts.
Dude, and then Braden Fisk's, like, his combine, like, when he's doing all the drills, it was so, like, there were a bunch of memes that came out. It's like you're meaning to tell me that this guy is going to be running at you full speed and you're going to be all right?
Yeah.
You know exactly what I'm talking about.
I think I might have tweeted one.
Yeah.
I think I did, yeah.
Oh, yeah. You did tweet one, and then I was talking about there was like a scout or somebody in the background, like making a face, and the face said it all. I'm gonna see if I can find the tweet, and then I'll pull it up.
Yeah, I think you replied to my tweet. Look in your replies, and you posted the picture of the guy. So as you do that, I'll mention other guys. But yeah, Braden Fisk, man, oh my gosh. That's the one defensive tackle that I would be happy with if the Raiders took him in the second round. That's the one D tackle. Chris Jenkins, I want to say, is a good nose tackle option. I don't think the Raiders need to be looking at like a pass rushing D tackle or like a 3-tech. They need to be looking for a nose tackle because John Jenkins is not getting any younger. I want to see he's like 34, if not 35. And honestly, if they were to draft a nose tackle, say in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round, they might be a guy that sort of, for lack of a better term, kicks John Jenkins off the roster come, cut downs.
Okay, so I've got it.
Yeah.
So this is Braden Fisk during the combine. And then, so Mike tweets, imagine you're in the pocket, you're looking for an open receiver, you're onto your 3rd read, a figure emerges in your peripheral. This is the last thing you see before catastrophe. Dude,
watch it in full. Look at that. Get out, dude.
Yeah, and this video is from at Antoine Staley. So shout out to Antoine Staley for providing this video on Twitter. But I took a screenshot. Yeah, this scout or whoever was there at the combine,
Coach,
this face says it all. That was literally hold on. That's literally him right there.
It's like, damn. Didn't know they can move like that.
He's thinking exactly what Mike was thinking, dude. He's like, oh my God.
Thank God I'm not quarterbacks in the NFL. I'd have to face that guy. Yeah. So, but back to Chris Jenkins. I'm pretty sure he's a nose tackle. At least he projects to be. Could be a solid option. I know we wanted to do this. Maybe on Thursday we can have it ready if we can. I mentioned to you the idea of doing an East-West Shrine Bowl, Key and Peele style, with all of our favorite names from this draft. One of the guys that will be on my team, on the East team, will be Rook Ororo. from Clemson.
Fabian Lovett Sr., FSU.
There was one that was really funny. Or Cedric Van Pran, Georgia. Anyways, Malik Mustafa, Wake Forest.
Yeah.
But you got one? Oh
no,
well,
I was looking at Jaden Crumedy.
Yeah. Rook Aurora. Like I really feel like I'm Scooby Doo. Aurora. Sorry.
And it's Rakestraw Jr., Missouri. Or Mizzou.
Chris Abrams Drain, Mizzou.
We
Rook,
have to do it.
I think we should on the next one. During the live stream, when we're just like on a down part, it's like the Titans are picking, they pick Joe Alt. It's like, whatever. We'll just start doing a draft until something big happens. But or name draft. But Rook is a guy who, like, physically, I could see him turning into a nose tackle. But he also might just be like the perfect frame for a D tackle. Like he's a big dude. Let me see. I have a list of the nose tackles in here. Like I have the D tackles and nose tackles kind of put together. So let me see. I want to say Mason Smith is a D tackle or nose tackle option. Yes, from LSU. Dwayne Carter is a solid nose tackle option from where's he from? Duke? Yep. From Duke. You got Tyler Davis down lower at Clemson. And also Jaden Crumedy, the guy that you mentioned from Mississippi State. Those are some of the good nose tackle options. And then two other and T'Vondre Sweat, of course, from Texas. Mm-hmm. Fucking all 366 pounds of him. Now, he's a guy who recently had I think, DUI, maybe down in Texas. I don't know if he had any, like, charges. Like, it's not like he's in jail or anything, but I think this DUI is going to hinder his draft stock. He was looked at until that moment, I think, as a high-end second-round pick. And now he's being looked at as like a third or fourth rounder. If he can stay out of trouble, he's the steal at defensive tackle, most likely, especially at nose tackle for sure. My only issue is, and I'm really not this guy usually, but I remember somebody was saying that he had to talk to GMs and coaches about like, I'm not going to party anymore. Like, I'm not going to be like my old self or whatever. Like, he had to kind of say those sort of things, which tells me that he's kind of just a party animal type guy. And he's out here getting DUIs and stuff. It's like, well, do I really want him in Vegas? I'm usually not that guy as far as Vegas goes, but this is one of those things where I think in the draft, you just don't know what these young guys like. This is the hard thing with like the NFL and people going from not having practically any money to being millionaires is they just don't know what to do with it, and no offense to them, right? But this could be a case where it's like, oh, I'm going to get a Corvette or a Lamborghini. That's the first thing I'm going to do because that's the first thing that comes to their mind, right? And then what do they do? A couple years later, we're talking about Henry Ruggs. It's like, just super unfortunate. And I hope none of that happens again. But, at some point to somebody, it will, unfortunately. But back onto greener pastures. Some of the non-nose tackles that are really interesting. Brandon Dorless from Oregon seems like a beast. Gabe Hall from Baylor was a guy that really showed out at the Senior Bowl. And Christian Boyd out of Northern Iowa is a guy that I think, even though he's a little lower on the list, I think he could come in and after a year or two, he could be a starter. Next up is linebacker.
Oh, boy.
Oh, boy, linebacker. If I'm being honest, I haven't really watched many linebackers. The one guy that I'm like head over heels for is Peyton Willis from NC State. Um, I think Edufwan Olafosio from Washington, another guy that I'll draft in the name draft. He's a really, really good linebacker. And then, I mean, Junior Colson is kind of the guy that's kind of propelled himself to being the number one linebacker in this class out of Michigan. Edgar and Cooper is a really good one. Trevin Wallace is interesting. He's got a funny like body type, but he looks like a linebacker. Cedric Gray, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., another former NFL player's son in this draft class. And then JD Bertrand is a guy that I think a lot of people have as like a sleeper type. And then Tommy Eichenberg from Ohio State is an interesting one. But like I said, I don't really have that much for linebackers. I don't really see the Raiders being interested in any. Well, at least not early. Granted, if he's there in the second round, I know he's got injury history, but Peyton Willis, man, he ran damn near a 4.3 40. Like, it was like a 4.41 or 4.42, which is absolutely insane for a linebacker. But if we could scroll down a bit for corner, and then we'll round out the DBs. Again, this is the consensus rankings. It's either Terrion Arnold or Quinyon Mitchell as the number one corner. Josh, do you have any opinion on who the number one corner is in this draft?
The only one out of the names that I've heard here is Kool-Aid McKinstry.
Oh, wow. That's the only one you've heard.
Let me look at the names. Yeah. I mean, all right, for those of you watching at home, if you've gone through like most of this pod without noticing, Mike's been doing most of the talking because I'm a person who doesn't necessarily watch college football. And this is the time of the year where a lot of people who do not watch college football and don't have a lot of interest in the draft try to pretend like they know a lot of stuff about the draft. Mike really likes this stuff. I'm not as into like college football and, just head down looking at all these draft prospects as everybody. I'll take a look at them when they're in the NFL, but I don't know. It's just, to me, there's too many guys to look at, and it's just like if I had to look at a handful of guys, I could give you opinions. But just a whole draft class worth that's like almost 300 players, and honestly more because there's going to be a lot of players that don't get drafted. It's a lot, and I'll save that for the people who actually want to, and I'll try not to give opinions on players when I don't have them. You know what I mean? The last thing I want to do is say something that's disingenuous or not genuine. So,
no, I agree. That's why most of this, especially on the defensive side and the offensive line, is consensus, because I don't necessarily have the full opinions that I would have, say, on running back and wide receiver and quarterback. Mm-hmm. Granted, not to argue at all with what you said, because I agree with you. I'd say the fun that I take from like looking at prospects and all that, you said you'll look at them when they're in the NFL, and I agree. Like, I'll do the same thing. The one thing for me about like projecting prospects and, for lack of a better term, scouting them, is that you can look at a player and be like, oh, he's so good at this, and I could totally see him being like this in the league, and you start projecting, and that's sort of the fun of it to me. But what can be the great part or the sucky part is, where do they go as far as, do they fit with the scheme or team or coach that they go to, and there's many other variables, but let's say a guy like Terrion Arnold, who I think some say is the top press man corner in this draft. He could go to a primary zone defense and just shit the bed. He could, even though he's probably the consensus number one corner. But in theory, I'm over here like, man, if he plays for a press man sort of coverage defense primarily, he's going to knock it out of the park. But if he goes to a team that's like, and most teams I think mostly play zone nowadays, but if he sucks in the zone, it's not going to work. But I'm going to basically some people are going to come out and say like, well, Terrion Arnold sucks. And I'm going to be like, well, I wouldn't say he sucks. It's just that it's not working out for him based off of where he landed and the defense that he went into, whatever. But there's probably not everything is black and white. There's so much gray to everything that you can't pinpoint usually why a prospect is a bust, So point being, the fun part of prospecting prospects is getting to see them sort of at what you project of them, and then getting to see them in the NFL and seeing if that was right, if they surpass it, or if they way under play themselves.
Yeah, I mean, just last year you were talking about how good CJ Stroud was going to be. You were like, oh my God, you were like, CJ Stroud is my guy. Josh McDaniels isn't going to get him. You were talking about that. And then it's just kind of cool. You had already told me about that. And I was just like, oh, okay, cool. We'll see. You showed me highlights and I'm like, oh yeah, this kid's pretty good. And then now look at him. And then, you were all in last year on a guy like Devon Witherspoon.
That was my guy. That was my guy for the Raiders. When I realized Stroud's not going to be there, I moved on to Witherspoon, and first year Pro Bowler. He popped off this fucking screen on his tape. I'm just like, oh my God. So
let me also give this perspective. Do you know how hard it is for me to get excited about the draft when every single, all right, let's recap every 49er draft in the past couple years. The first round. Okay. So let's work backwards. Okay. So last year, no first round pick. The year before that, no first round pick. The year before that, Trey Lance. And I was super excited. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to see the future of the franchise right here. And I only got to see him play 4 games. And I'm like, you know what? All right, excuse my language. Fuck that. Fuck that, dude. I still don't even know if he's good or not. And literally everything just all right, how excited can I really get for a prospect? That guy had more invested into him than any other draft pick in besides
that running back, the Vikings.
No, Herschel Walker was already an established commodity who just the Vikings decided they would trade their whole team for. Yeah. But all right, so Trey Lance. Before that, it was Ayuk and Kinlaw. And Ayuk was good. Kinlaw wasn't that good. Right? And he how many sacks does Kinlaw have in his career? Javon Kinlaw sacks. He has 5 sacks in his career. And he's already played out his rookie contract. I don't think they picked up the 5th-year option though. Okay. Let's see here. Before Kinlaw, it was Bosa. I liked Bosa. Before that, it was McGlinchey. Before that, it was Solomon Thomas and Reuben Foster. And Reuben Foster did not last long on the 49ers. Solomon Thomas did play out his entire rookie contract, but like the Niners could have taken so many players in that spot. They could have taken Mahomes. They could have taken Watson. They could have taken Christian McCaffrey, who's on the team now. You know what I mean?
So. Yeah, it's a crapshoot at the end of the day, and that makes it harder to get into, I would say. And it makes it hard to be like bona fide, like I am so confident in this team making the right pick, especially for me as a Raider fan, right? But also being that I've never witnessed my team win a playoff game, it's like this is the magical time of the year for me. So, yeah. But no, I agree with you. Getting back to corner though, consensus has it either Terrion Arnold or Quinyon Mitchell is the top corner. Like I mentioned, Terrion Arnold is like the top press man corner in this draft. And he's also I'm sure he's a damn good zone corner as well. Quinyon Mitchell is like I think some people might think that he's something like Devon Witherspoon from last year. I don't think he's anywhere near him. He's just I think he's a great zone corner. He can lock down a side of a field. I think. Granted, he's from Toledo, so what level of competition was he going against? He had a game where he picked off the quarterback 4 times. Like, he's not doing that against Alabama. He's doing that against, like, Southern Christian, Technical Institute. You know what I mean?
It's funny that you say that, but literally Sam Womack III on the 49ers, I've mentioned it multiple times how he had like a really strong preseason in his rookie year. And I think Womack was probably like a 5th round pick. And Mitchell probably is going to be higher than that. They both come from Toledo. And so Mitchell, Womack had several interceptions in the preseason. And I'm like, oh man, this guy's going to be a baller. So it's funny that you mentioned like Toledo, if it's going to translate to the NFL. I don't think everything does, but maybe playmaking ability. If you have hands, you have hands. You know what I mean?
I think it is late here. I think it's completely situational, player by player, just like it is for was it McCormick, the guard? Yeah, Mason McCormick from South Dakota, or their running back, whose name I'm forgetting right now, but Isaiah Davis. From these small schools, it's completely situational, and really it's about the player and where they go, how they fit, and so forth. Granted, a couple months ago, Quinyon Mitchell was my top corner. He's now my 3rd corner. And it's because I've realized I think Terrion Arnold probably fits the Raiders better as far as being, the better press corner. And I think, zone defense is a little bit more teachable than telling a guy, hey, press better. Like Terrion Arnold just glues himself to the receiver. He had a rep against Ladd McConkey, who's arguably the best route runner in this draft, where he just draped him. And he's just so it's so easy to him to just get his hand in front of the receiver and just bat the ball down, and I love that. Granted, my number 1 corner is Cooper DeJean from Iowa. And given that the only corner that you've recognized is Kool-Aid McKinstry, I have to say it. It's funny, but I'm just saying it because it's true. Cooper DeJean is a white cornerback.
Is it pronounced DeJean or DeJean?
I think it's DeJean from what I've heard, but I don't know. I don't know for sure. I guess we'll find out on draft day. Um, Cooper DeJean is a guy who everybody says, he's when whoever drafts him can put him wherever they want on the defense. For one thing, he can play outside. Absolutely, that's where he's played at Iowa. He could play inside. Definitely, he could be a nickel, slot corner, box safety, whatever you want him to be. He could be your free safety. He could be your strong safety. He's the most versatile DB in this class. And granted, he's not getting mocked around 13th overall. I don't think he's going to be a Raider. The teams I've seen more likely projected with him are like the Jaguars, Packers, teams in that sort of range. I could see him. I could see him being a Steeler, like to a T. Like he reminds me of a Steeler, but I'll just spoil it right now. He's one of my Niner fits, and I think Cooper DeJean is, in my opinion, other than some of the top guards and centers in this class, I think Cooper DeJean is the home run pick for the 49ers in the first round if they could somehow land him. Because you could stick him at the slot or you could stick him at safety. And you'll have a killer defensive back out there just roaming, Or you could start him at corner and
I don't know if I would call it a home run pick because it's not a need.
It's not a need, but your top two corners have 1 year left. You're going to need a corner at some point. Your third corner has 1 year left. Your only guys that have years left in their deal are guys that are probably considered depth pieces, Womack and Luter. Lucas, Yadam, and Rock Ya-Sin are fine corners to have as depth and potential starters in a pinch. But they're
So
not
you're
the
saying,
guys that...
Yeah. Sorry. It's late.
Yeah. They're not the guys that Cooper DeJean is. And also, again, go back to the Niners really quick. Let me see your safeties. You got nobody behind Jair Brown. Oh, you got Hufanga. Okay, he's coming off injury. But George Odom, is he a quality starter?
No. So I'm projecting right now, Jair Brown is going to play free safety, and Hufanga is going to slide back into strong safety.
Right. Ambry Thomas, is he a good slot corner?
No.
There you go. Cooper DeJean, home run pick. You got your slot corner, day one. The thing about Cooper DeJean, and you can take it back to the draft things when you have a second, but the thing about Cooper DeJean that impresses the shit out of me is that he does not panic. You see these corners all the time on a fade, just panic. They don't know when to turn their head. They just flop their hands in the air. Cooper DeJean does not panic. He knows where the ball is at all times. At all times. I've heard people compare him to a taller, probably faster Eric Weddle. And I think that's probably dead on, except imagine Eric Weddle if he could play corner. Yeah, over the past couple of days, DeJean has definitely become my favorite corner in this class. But there's plenty of guys that are, really good. Again, I don't expect him for the Raiders. I think some team's going to just knock it out of the park with him. Maybe the Niners probably isn't the team that will take him because they don't have quite the need as other teams like the Jags and maybe Packers. But I still think, man, I just imagine like the Niners offense has become your strength. Getting DeJean is a good way of equalizing and making your defense a strength again.
I'm gonna go ahead and say this. I think DeJean could definitely be the pick because what screams 49ers more than drafting us one of their strengths already, and not only that, but like Cooper DeJean is a white cornerback. How often do those come around?
They don't come around, and I think the Niners, like, honestly, somebody said this, and I was like, yes. He is
Let me get to
Christian
my point
McCaffrey.
before I seem racist and say, the Niners,
Yeah,
my point is, like, it seems like a lot of the 49ers stars are white, and
yeah.
this isn't like a me thing. I'm blaming Kyle. Okay,
Oh yeah,
go get him, not me.
it's John Lynch's fault. But I think Cooper DeJean. Somebody else said this, I think, but I just heard it and I was like, yeah. Like when you watch Cooper DeJean play corner, it's like watching Christian McCaffrey play running back. Like it's like that.
Hmm.
Just he makes it look so easy. You know, it's really impressive. Nate Wiggins is a guy who's just really skinny for a corner, and I'm kind of out on him. Um, and he's luckily for me with the Raiders, I don't think he's in a position where he'll last to the Raiders in the second round. Khalid McKinstry is a guy who a year ago people were saying would be a top 10 pick this year. Now he's like, he might be lucky to get picked by the Niners, at 31. But for lack of a better term, in that like 25 to 40 range is probably where he goes relative to last year saying he's a top 10 pick. His teammate overtook him as the top corner. What does that say? You know? And then you have guys who are like second round to third round guys who have a lot of potential in Ennis Rakestraw Jr. from Missouri, Max Melton out of Rutgers, TJ Tampa is a guy I really like out of Iowa State. Obviously, he'd be great for the Buccaneers, but I'd really like him in Vegas because his last name is Tampa. Kamari Lassiter is a guy that I can't tell if he's going to be a nickel or an outside boundary corner, but he plays like an absolute madman. He wants the smoke, you know. There are two guys that I'm leaving out who are specifically nickel corners. They will show up in a little bit here. DJ James out of Auburn is a good looking corner. The rest of these guys I haven't watched quite as much. But Kyrie Jackson is a guy that kind of piques my interest as far as like kind of the numbers and such. And I think Elijah Jones is a little bit of a sleeper. And also Josh Newton. Like it varies between some people have him way higher, some people might have him lower. So I find that interesting. And then if we want to just move on to safety real quick, I don't really have many thoughts here. I think the Raiders could absolutely draft a safety. I think the Niners could absolutely draft one too. Jaden Hicks is kind of the consensus number one, but personally, I really like Javon Bullard out of Georgia. He's the type of guy that I really like at safety. Kind of think Buda Baker with this guy. And if I'm being honest, I've heard a lot of these other names, but I haven't really gotten to watch them yet at safety. But this is the consensus sort of rank here. So, yeah. So now we can move on to let's move on to the team fits.
All right. So now we've finished the first quarter of our stream. Get ready, guys, well,
This is
actually,
an 8 hour
we're only
stream,
10%.
baby.
Yeah, we're only 10% done with the stream.
We should be getting done by hopefully 3 hours. For the love of God.
Yeah. All right. Who should the 49ers take? Let me go ahead and switch over the tab to this. So, we looked at all the prospects and we see a couple holes that they need to fill. I've kind of made this list over here of the 49ers' biggest needs, in my opinion. You could, I think Mike is kind of like convincing me to flip-flop. I just think that, man, you should absolutely invest in the offensive line. But I'm going to go ahead and name these names in order of, the biggest needs, like the positional names. And then, Mike, I want you to give me a couple players in each position. Just name off the names And then afterwards we'll get into the fits. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
All right. So who are a couple guys at right tackle that you can see the 49ers drafting, Mike? Or you think they should?
Well, a guy, I don't think we even mentioned him, but a guy that a lot of smoke has been said that a lot of teams like him is Patrick Paul out of Houston. I want to say statistically he was like one of the top 3 tackles in college football. But there's just a lot of people who watch film that don't necessarily like him as much as these other tackles. So he's kind of like a fringe first rounder, which would put him right at that 31 spot to me. Granted, you also have Roger Rosengarten, Blake Fisher from Notre Dame, Christian Jones from Texas. I'd say those are some of the guys.
So actually, I said that we were going to go through all these positions. I'm just going to name the positions of need, and then we're going to go to your. We're just going to go
Team
straight
fits.
to your team fits, because we already went through like all the players in the draft.
Yep. Let's do that.
Okay. So, kind of a redo. Everybody, starting from here. The 49ers' biggest needs and who they should be taking in the draft. I think that they need to take a right tackle. They need to take a safety. They need to take a linebacker, a guard, a center, and a defensive end. Honestly, I think they need more than one. They need more than one safety because they need to build the depth. They need somebody who can fill in if Leonard Floyd needs to or I guess isn't available. Like typically he is pretty available, but he's on the wrong side of 30. And Yetur Gross-Matos didn't play every single game last season, I think. The 49ers just need to make sure that they have solid players opposite Nick Bosa. You know what I mean? And then players who can fill in for Nick Bosa when Nick Bosa needs a rest. In terms of offensive line, I was going to say the 49ers should take multiple, but I already have it listed here. So I think that they need, at least a center, or at least a backup center, at least a backup left guard, hopefully a starting right guard, but it's going to be too much to ask. I think if they're going to get a right tackle at in the first 2 rounds, I don't think they're going to get a right guard. But I would like to see them just go back to back offensive line in the first 2 rounds. I would love it. As a former high school offensive lineman myself, I consider that a dream in the draft. But I'm going to go ahead and switch over the page to the 49ers fits that Mike has, sort of listed. So Mike, who is the first guy on the list of, a good fit for the 49ers to have? Is it Cooper DeJean?
No, although he's one of my top guys. I went in order of positions, just kind of went position by position and got at least like one guy for most positions. So starting with a running back that I think would fit well, I have Blake Watson from Memphis. Again, I have a thing for Memphis running backs, and this is a guy who kind of just once he gets the football, he automatically hits the high gear, and it just reminds me of a guy like so who's the backup running back you mentioned earlier, 6th-round pick?
I mentioned Elijah Mitchell.
I think he reminds me a bit of Elijah Mitchell, but with maybe a little bit better pass catching ability, and I could see them liking a guy like him. I could also see a running back like Cody Schrader, or even Tyrone Tracy Jr. for the Niners. My next pick is a guy that might not surprise you, just based off of what I said earlier. I'd say he's the best route runner in this class, and if you were to trade Brandon Ayuk, this guy would make only more sense to me. Ladd McConkey from Georgia. Another white player.
Yeah, somehow the 49ers are always tied to these white players. or these white skill position players.
And then I already mentioned Brendan Rice earlier as a deep threat option. But just to throw in another slot receiver with surefire hands, I added Roman Wilson from Michigan.
Real quick, before we move on from that, you know what makes it worse? The 49ers drafted Trey Lance, a black quarterback, and only played him 4 games and decided to dump him off. Like, that's what makes it worse. They're like, all right, Mr. Irrelevant, like, yeah, I don't know. I really don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, but we have talked about it. Here's my thing, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, but not specifically towards Lance, but just all prospects in general. They all look good as prospects to some degree, one way or another. But when they fail, when they don't work out with a team, whatever the reason may be, it's not black and white. Like, it's not for sure that, Kyle Shanahan just hates his guts. It's like the thing I was saying when we had our first couple of podcasts was like, we don't get to see what he does on the practice field. We don't get to see, we definitely don't get to see what he's like in the quarterback room, watching film, breaking down film. Maybe he's horrible at that shit, and we just don't know it. And Shanahan was like, I can't deal with this guy. I just can't. Because he was so raw, Yeah. That's just one example.
I want to make it very, very clear. I want to make this like abundantly clear. I'm not saying that the 49ers are only drafting these players to become stars just because they're white. I just want to make, because I know somebody might interpret it as that. And I'm not saying that the 49ers didn't like Trey Lance as their quarterback because he's black. I'm not saying that at all. It might have sounded like that a minute ago. It's not what I'm saying. I'm very tired. It's 1 a.m.
Yeah. I don't think anybody's taking it that way. Granted, my next 3 players are white, starting with Zach Frazier from West Virginia. Again, ex-wrestler, center. I view center as one of your top needs. I think your offensive line is as good as your center and your left tackle. But if you have a shitty center, your offensive line probably isn't that good. Again, you have Trent Williams. You can run off to the left, and you're probably good. But having a good center is a big thing, and I think you guys can really upgrade at the position.
Oh, I'd love it.
Yep. Along with that is another center, obviously, one of my guys. Oh, yeah. Oh, there we go. Jackson Powers Johnson from Oregon. Same thing, just more of a power blocker, I think. He's got strong hands. There's really not much more to say, just center for the Niners. And then another interior offensive lineman here, Graham Barton out of Duke. I think if it's not Cooper DeJean for me, I think Graham Barton is the home run pick for the Niners this year. I think this is the guy where, again, people have said he could play 5 positions on the offensive line. Line him up wherever you need him the most and put your best 5 on the field. I think that's the best thing the Niners can do on the interior. And Graham Barton's probably the guy for me that I'm like, if I'm a Niner fan, that's my number 1 choice. But I'm not a Niner fan, and I'm not going to tell you what to think. My next choice is Dominic Puni, a guy that I alluded to is somebody who is an interior lineman, but some view him as a top-end center as well. So positional versatility, interior offensive lineman, 4 straight players. You can kind of see a theme for me of what I view as a massive need for the Niners. And I'd say Puni is probably more of a later round, 2nd to 3rd round option than the first 3 guys. Now, moving on to defense, Braylon Trice, Washington edge defender. I know you said defensive end is one of your needs. I think he fits. He would be a beast opposite Nick Bosa, or even taking over for Bosa. Should Bosa take a couple plays off his rookie season, Trice's rookie season, I could see because Leonard Floyd is only on a 1-year deal, right?
Let me double check that. I'm pretty sure, yes.
Point being here, I could see Braylon
No, he's
Trice
2-year
kind of.
deal.
Oh, 2 year. Okay. All right. Regardless, I could see Braylon Trice kind of running a similar role as Tyree Wilson, the Raiders' first round pick from last year, where he kind of comes in as a situational pass rusher to alleviate the starting pass rusher and get some good snaps in. My next pick is a guy I also kind of alluded to earlier, Johnny Newton. If you want a D tackle at 31, this is probably your guy. Next up, Braden Fisk. I just think putting Braden Fisk and Nick Bosa on the same D line is unfair. And it would be a lot of fun for us to watch, and it would be not a lot of fun for the quarterbacks that they are facing. Next up is the guy, Cooper DeJean. I already explained that one. I think he'd be a home run. You have safety as one of your top needs. Put him in there. Put him right in there. You could keep, oh gosh, what's his name? The third rounder from last year.
Third rounder from last year on the
safety for the Niners.
Oh, Brown.
Jair Brown. You could keep Jair Brown as your third safety, or even intertwine sort of flip-flop Cooper DeJean and Jair Brown. Have Hufanga taken over at free or strong safety wherever he is. Keep him on the field at all times, and then you have these other two guys kind of intertwining. They could switch between nickel and whatever. You could just kind of rotate your defensive backs and keep, just like the offensive line, best five on the field. And then here are the two guys that I had mentioned earlier. Again, you feel that Ambry Thomas is not the best slot corner in the league right now. So here are two guys that I did not get to mention, mostly because I ran out of space on my rankings board. Starting with Mike Stanristil out of Michigan. This is everybody's favorite nickel corner in the draft. He is viewed as a second-round pick. He would probably be a home run pick. And then here's a guy who's probably viewed as a second to third-round pick. Also a nickel corner, Andrew Phillips out of Kentucky. I think as far as nickel corner being a need for you guys, these would be two potential home run picks for the 49ers.
I want to revisit this like after or during the draft, probably the week after the draft, so we could look at it all. And then we'll see like if the 49ers picked any of these guys, and then I want to hear you say, "Oh, you know what? It wasn't such a good pick." No, I'm just playing.
Yeah, you never know.
All right. So I think that's all that we have for the 49ers. So Niner fans, if you're still awake right now at 1:03 a.m., you are free to go. You're dismissed unless you would like to stay for the Raiders and then also hear some of Mike's sleepers.
Yeah.
And if you would like to tune in tomorrow, that's also great.
Either way, it will be up on YouTube.
Yep. All right.
Yep.
Who should the Raiders take, Mike?
Let's scooch up just a little bit more. Keep going. No, keep going. Because you started with the Niners. Keep going. Keep it moving. Yeah, right there. No, go down. A little bit more. Look at that. Offensive needs, defensive needs. See that? Bottom right. There we go. All right. So just like we started with the Niners, I have needs for both sides of the ball. On offense, starting with quarterback, obviously, but right there with it, right tackle. You got right guard. Even though we signed Whitehair, I feel he's more of a really good depth piece than a plug-and-play starting right guard right now. I still see us needing a running back in this draft to complete the running back room. And we are also sitting with absolutely nobody at fullback. So probably an undrafted free agent will be our starting fullback next season. Or they just run it without a fullback, but I highly doubt that. As far as defense, top need corner, because John Jenkins is, I want to say, 34, 35 years old, I view nose tackle as the next biggest need. get a nice big run defender in there. Safety, our 2 starters are running at 1-year deals right now. Same goes for the linebacker position, but we also have let's see, what is his name? Luke Masterson on a restricted deal, so we'll have him for 2 years, really. And then obviously also I have edge defender just because I see a very high likelihood, unfortunately, that Malcolm Kuntz is probably going on his final year with the Raiders, and then he will look for a big contract after this season. So with that being said, moving on to my Raider fits, I already started with Jaden Daniels. The next fit is probably pretty obvious here, but I've got Michael Penix Jr. at quarterback. I think those.
I dare the Raiders to find a way to draft both.
Daniels and Penix?
Yeah.
Let's run it like the Redskins back in 2012 with Robert Griffin III, or 2010, and Kirk Cousins. Look how that ended out, Everybody would have thought it would, Robert Griffin was the guy, and then it turns out it was Kirk Cousins all along. Moving on, I think a really good team fit from what I can tell, as well as, in my opinion, probably the best running back in this draft, Trey Benson would be a home run pick if they could somehow get him in the 3rd. I don't think he lasts to the 4th round, but if he did, run the pick in. I mentioned a couple episodes ago that, as far as running back goes, I would like to get speed in the running back room as far as who we draft. Benson's a fast runner. Another guy who is very fast, Jalen Wright from Tennessee. I think if you could pick him, he's a potential home run pick. I just think Trey Benson's better. I would go as far to say Blake Corum is better. I'll get to Ray Davis in a little bit. Another fit, although this is more of a later round guy, is Isaac Guerendo. He is a 99th percentile athlete at the position, which means he projects pretty damn well. Granted, he didn't get the usage that he probably should have at Louisville, which is both maybe a negative, but mostly a positive, I think, because he's got fresh legs. He's also got kick return high potential. He's an ex-kick returner. So I see a lot of pluses there. And also getting him in there as the 3rd back to kind of develop, come in as a little change of pace guy his rookie year. It would work, I think. I think it would work. And he has the potential, again, 99th percentile prospect. He might have the body type and whatnot to develop into a 3-down back. And you can get him probably in the 4th, 5th round. Next up at wide receiver, I kind of mentioned him earlier, but Jermaine Burton out of Alabama. We need speed at wide receiver. We're out here with Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers right now. You got Trey Tucker, but he's sort of a smaller slot receiver. He's got the speed, but, I think he's more of like a gadget guy. You can throw him the fade, but he doesn't have like the frame to snag the ball out of the air like, say, Jermaine Burton does. So I think he would be a great fit. Funny enough, just like his father, I think Brendan Rice could play for both the Niners and the Raiders. I think he'd be a solid fit for the Raiders. Again, as the deep threat. Another guy that I mentioned earlier as a big time, I really want this guy for the Raiders. Christian Haynes at right guard. He started 4 straight seasons at UConn at right guard. I want to say statistically.
Sorry to interrupt. This question has been eating me up all night. Who is the draft prospect? I want to say it's an offensive lineman who has long blonde hair.
I don't think I have him on here. I think his name's he's an offensive tackle.
What's his name?
From North Dakota State or something like that. Is it Crum?
Oh, I think it is.
It's like Noah Crum or something like that.
Yeah.
I just couldn't fit him on here, but yeah, I wanted to put him on.
I think it was him. Thank you. I was
Yeah.
looking for that like name, and then I was like Googling, but Google wasn't helping. I was like, it's like long blonde hair offensive lineman NFL draft prospect, and then Clay Matthews.
Oh,
Thanks.
thanks. Yeah. So yeah, Christian Haynes. Another thing Antonio Pierce mentioned about players he's looking for are guys that have played and have experience, and have succeeded, and have been through adversity and all those things, but mostly have played, and really show what they can be. And Christian Haynes is one of those guys where he's played for years and years and years, and he's played damn good. And I think he's a day one starter at right guard. That would be a home run pick. If I second round is fine by me, but if he slipped to the third round, trade up for him. Next up is another interior offensive lineman, Tanner Bortolini out of Wisconsin. He could be a backup center. He could be the starting right guard. He could be your backup at every interior position, whatever you need him to be. I like that versatility. This one's pretty obvious here. Talisi Fuaga. He's also one of my guys that I will get to soon. But as of today, and as of a month ago, and as of 2 months ago, maybe 3, my thought has been run the card in at pick 13 if Talisi Fuaga is sitting there. And that would, again, be my pick today. Next up is Travis Glover Jr. out of Georgia State. This is a guy that I want to say Trishan Kuhn mentioned as a really good fit for the Raiders. I want to say what's upsetting me is I actually forget what position he's playing because I don't have it here. I want to say he is an edge defender or an interior defensive lineman. In fact, why don't I just search it up? Travis Glover Jr. Let's see. Draft. Oh, he's an offensive tackle. He's a right tackle, I'm assuming. That makes way more sense. So, yeah, part of the reason that I put him here is because he's at the bottom of the offensive tackles. That's my bad. Yes. He's an offensive tackle, Georgia State. Nice sleeper pick here. But also a good fit for the Raiders. Maybe could be a 5th, 6th round pick. We'll see. Next up is let's see. I believe this is the interior defensive lineman. Yes, interior defensive lineman, another sleeper out of Clemson, Tyler Davis. I don't know if he's a nose or 3-tech, but regardless, this is another guy that I saw Trishan Kuhn mentioned as a fit for the Raiders. And then I have Terrion Arnold. If they want to go corner in the first round, get the press guy. If he struggles in zone, teach him up. And then another corner that has been mentioned as a fit for the Raiders is Kalen Carson out of Wake Forest. This is another sleeper pick, later round guy that could fit the Raiders pretty well later on in the draft. And that's pretty much all I got for the Raiders. I would mention there's a lot more running backs that I would probably pair with the Raiders. I love Tyrone Tracy Jr. You'll find in a few minutes here that Ray Davis is one of my guys. In fact, he's my favorite running back in this class. Like I know I said Trey Benson is the best running back in this class. Ray Davis is my favorite running back in this class. And honestly, he kind of reminds me of Josh Jacobs. So maybe I should have put him as a fit over a guy like Jalen Wright. But I just figured for the necessity of speed, I put the 3 guys that I feel are the fastest in Benson, Jalen Wright, and Isaac Guerendo.
All right, so are we ready to get to your guys and your sleepers?
Yes, sir. And then we'll wrap it up.
All right. Now getting to Mike's sleepers. But first, we're going to start with Mike's guys.
Yes. We already got Jaden Daniels, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Ricky Pearsall. Next up, Again, not a shocker. Michael Penix Jr. Next up are probably two guys that I just mentioned, Tyrone Tracy Jr. and Mr. All-Day Ray Davis of Kentucky at running back. At center, we got Jackson Powers Johnson of Oregon. On the interior, we got Christian Haynes out of UConn. Not a shocker here at all. Talisi Fuaga, Oregon State, at right tackle. Another right tackle, this is a guy that we mentioned earlier, and I said that, I think I said like hint, hint. This is a guy I really like. Christian Jones out of Texas. This is a guy who was a stud at the Senior Bowl. Stud. He's projected like a 5th round pick. If the Raiders can get him in the 4th round, I'd be ecstatic, especially if they hadn't picked a tackle yet. Go ahead and reach for him in the 4th round. Maybe he'll go early in the 4th round. I have no idea, but here's a guy that I probably didn't talk enough about, Marshawn Kneeland out of Eastern Michigan. Oh no, I did. I talked a good amount about him. He reminds me a little bit of Max Crosby. He's got that motor and that disruptability where it just seems like he's always in the backfield, like first, I think he's projected to be about a 2nd round pick. I don't think the Raiders take him, but man, whoever takes him is probably going to be happy. I think in past years, a guy that I was really in on that this kind of reminds me of is I don't know why I'm forgetting his name. The Steelers defensive end, not TJ Watt, but the other guy. I'm gonna find him right now because I need to know this. He was a guy that I was so in on.
While you find him, I just want to say, as we are nearing the end of Mike's guys, these are not players that Mike thinks that the Raiders are gonna draft. These are guys that Mike thinks are going to be like great in the NFL, right, Mike?
Yep. Okay, fine. I'll go for the Steelers depth chart. Why not? Okay, roster. Fine. Jeez. All right, let's go by number. I'm pretty sure he's number 52. Nope. Alex Highsmith, 56. Alex Highsmith was a guy a couple years ago. I was like, how is this guy not a 2nd round pick? I think he went in like the 4th, 5th round. Absolute stud. Okay, next up is a guy that I think I had as a Niners fit, Braylon Trice out of Washington, another edge defender. I see him being pretty damn good. Another non-shocker here, Braden Fisk. I mean, come on, dude. Dude is an absolute animal. And then here's the one that's probably maybe the most interesting one because of recent news about him. But T'Vondre Sweat out of Texas. I think this is the guy in the draft that is going way lower than he should if the projections are right, and he goes in like the 4th, 5th round. Again, a month ago, he was a 2nd round pick and a high one at that. Like top nose tackle. If the Raiders are able to get him in the 4th, 5th round of this draft, I mean, you got this guy, honestly, is probably the closest thing we've gotten to Vince Wilfork in a long time. So, granted, I think Vince Wilfork's better, but, Next up at linebacker, Peyton Wilson. 4.42 speed. Absolute just piss missile. If you could scroll down just a little bit for me. Next up, we got Cooper DeJean. No shocker there. And then a guy that I raved about a little bit, TJ Tampa out of Iowa State. I think he's a great physical corner that could do some real good in the NFL. And then at safety, I got Javon Bullard. The guy that I mentioned was kind of my favorite safety in this class. And then we can move on to sleepers.
To some sleepers. Before we
go to sleep, yep. Being that it's 1:20 a.m. All right,
Oh
at
my God.
quarterback,
I'm going to be
my
miserable
sleeper.
tomorrow.
Oh yeah. At quarterback, my sleeper is Devin Leary out of Kentucky. At running back, Rasheen Ali out of Marshall, as well as Blake Watson, a guy that I said is a Niners fit, and a guy that I was raving about earlier, Dylan Lobb, or Lobby, however you say his last name, from New Hampshire. Another running back, Kamani Vidal out of Troy. I really like the way that he plays. At wide receiver, Jacob Coing, or Cowing, however you pronounce it, from Arizona. And again, Jermaine Burton out of Alabama. Okay. Next up, we might have some guys that I'm not even going to lie to you right now. I don't know their positions because I mistakenly didn't put their positions. But Jalen Coker from Holy Cross. These are basically guys that I couldn't fit on my my board to the right, because I only had so much space to fit these guys. So really quick, Jalen Coker from Holy Cross is a wide receiver. Next up is another guy. Oopsies. Wrong color. Tanner Bortolini, guy I've mentioned a few times now. Whenever that loads. There it goes. And then another interior offensive lineman as a sleeper. Not a hardcore sleeper, but just I think he's better than he's ranked. Christian Mahogany. And another one, Mason McCormick. Sort of the same deal. And I think he's like a high percentile prospect, like athletically, McCormick. And then a really low sleeper guard is Charles Turner out of LSU. I want to say he did pretty good at the Pro Bowl. The Reese's Senior Bowl. And then we have Elijah Klein. I want to say another interior offensive lineman out of UTEP. And then we got Gabriel Murphy out of UCLA. He is an edge defender. We have Braden McGregor, another edge defender out of Michigan. Linebacker Jaden Ford out of Texas. You could possibly scroll down just a little bit, sir. I really like Jalen Ford. He looks like a pretty good pass defending linebacker.
Sorry, I'm looking at something real quick. Okay.
You're good. Next up is Maurice Liu Fau from Notre Dame. I forget if he's a corner or a safety. Actually, I want to say he's a linebacker. Maurice Liu Fau is a linebacker out of Notre Dame. And then speaking of Notre Dame, we have Cam Hart at corner. I would say obviously a sleeper corner, a guy that I really just couldn't fit on my cornerback list, along with those nickel corners that I put as Niner fits.
Before you announce this final one, can we acknowledge that this is the Mr. Irrelevant of the night?
This is Mr. Irrelevant, and he has not been named yet tonight. He's a guy that I was first put on recently by one of PFF's guys on Twitter. He said basically like, get me this guy in the 6th or 7th round. And Ted Nguyen quote tweeted him saying, he's like a heat-seeking missile. And at first I was just like, nice. But then like I thought about it later. I was like, wow, that's a total pun because it's Trey Taylor, safety out of Air Force. Heat-seeking missile out of Air Force. You get it?
I think I understand.
Yeah. So
something about his name being Trey.
Yeah. No, but solid late round free safety option out of Air Force right there, Trey Taylor. And that, if you want to zoom out somehow, is my big shebang for the 2024 draft. Oh, there it is. I'm going to keep it there. And then, we'll come back after the draft and look at where players were drafted and stuff like that relative to the Niners, Raiders. We'll see if any of my fits were correct, if you will. And also if the Raiders or Niners took any of my guys or sleepers.
You put in a lot of work into this, Mike.
Yeah, I tried, man. Honestly, what took me the longest of all things, and I kind of regret how long it took me, but the running backs. Because every time I looked at different running backs, it just kept changing for me. And then finally I was just like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm putting Ray Davis as high as I want. Even though all the, consensus is like, oh, at best RB8. I'm like, no, screw that. He's RB3 for me. I love him. Same for Tyrone Tracy. Although, granted, I couldn't put him as high.
It's pretty solid, Mike. You went above and beyond.
I am officially ready for the draft. We have 3 days, or really 2 days, 2.5 days to breathe, let all the bullshit rumors come in, breathe them back out, and then Thursday, 5:30, everything gets real. Find out what's been going on.
I have to say, all right, I'm excited. I'm excited for the draft. This, I guess you could call it weekend. It's like a 3-day thing, right? But it starts Thursday, ends on Saturday. I'm excited for it, but I cannot wait for the draft process to be gone. I love when the draft is actually occurring, but I I really can't stand the whole crapshoot and just mindlessly. It's so mind numbing just talking about prospects. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There comes a point where it's just excessive. I definitely, the past couple of days making this list, I've worn myself out a little bit to the point where I'm excited. I'm going on a little work trip these next couple of days. I'm excited to just kind of not think about the draft. And then when I come back home Thursday, like an hour, hopefully before the draft. I'm hoping I'm not late. It's going to go from just not thinking about it and just work to it's go time. Let's do this. And I'm going to be super excited. So it's my favorite time of the year, but I agree. Once it's over, it's there's a part of me for a day or two that's like, damn, it's over. I have to wait a year again. But also all right, good. Let's get into the real off season now. Let's get into training camp and everything.
I like the draft days. Thursday, Friday, and Saturday is the days that I'm going to be enjoying myself. Everything before then, the combine is kind of cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Senior Bowl's great.
I'm just, we're going to build this channel. We can go to the Senior Bowl. I know you would like to go to the Senior Bowl.
That'd be dope.
That's probably a bucket list item for you since you like the draft so much.
Oh, yeah. Sweet.
Anyways, everyone, thank you for watching. We'll catch you guys in the next episode. Like I said, if you're watching right now or seeing this at the end of the episode, I guess it's kind of irrelevant, but I will put timestamps tomorrow.
Hell yeah.
So if you want to rewatch sections of the video, now that you're here right now, you can skip back. I'm going to put timestamps. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night. Well, good morning. We'll catch you guys next time. Peace.